My girlfriend is pregnant, and I'm only 15 years old. Hi, I'm Matt, and I want to talk to you about something that happened a couple years ago that changed my life forever. I remember I was in junior year, and we were all very stressed out because we didn't know who to invite to the prom. At that time, that was the most important thing. And since I was a basketball player, it was even harder because I had to pick the sexiest girl, and I was afraid of being rejected. One day during the internship, I saw a girl sitting there. She looked gorgeous and seemed not to fit in, and I knew that she was the one for me. I ended up as the worst player that day, and I thought I would die of shame. That's what brought us together. That's how she noticed me. Everything was very fast in our relationship, and we liked the same things, and we thought we were the perfect match. We kissed the first time that same afternoon, and 2 weeks later we were officially dating. I didn't know that much about sex, and I didn't really give any importance to contraceptives. This is why, more than once, we had unprotected sex. We did not believe that anything bad could happen to us, and we preferred not to think about the consequences. Of course, that was a terrible idea. 2 months after we were together for the first time, my girlfriend called me very worried, telling me that she had a pregnancy test and that was positive. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. At first, I was very annoyed. Then I got even more frightened. I wasn't prepared to be a dad. This wasn't how it should be one of the best years of my life. Things did not disappear on the next day, and I had to take care of this new situation. The hardest thing was to talk to my parents, who had a lot of plans for my life. And now all that was about to go in the garbage. Luckily, I plucked up courage and spoke to them because they immediately began to support me and no longer felt alone or lost. They explained to me all I had to do, so I finished my school year while working at night to get as much money as possible. And even though I didn't feel anything for my girlfriend, I never stopped supporting her, even when she didn't want to see me. The most troubling thing was the day she had to give birth, since this day came 2 weeks early, and I don't know if I was prepared for what was coming. All my doubts disappeared when I saw my daughter, but I realized that my life would never be the same. My classmates didn't understand my new worries, and I could no longer talk to them about the same things. I had to work and study at the same time so I could take care of my daughter. And although things did not go as expected with my girlfriend, we were good friends, with a daughter in common. Now she is my reason to become a better person every day. And although sometimes I wonder how everything would have been if this had not happened, I always think I would not change anything I have now. I grew up as a person, and now I am a good man, a good father. This was not easy for me, and I'm sure everything would have been easier if I had someone to talk to about it. That's why I invite you to subscribe to this channel and find out more stories like mine and many of us, so you won't have to feel alone.
I am Rita, and I will take you back to the 1999s. What was life like in the 1999s? In 1999, I was only 16-year-old. I remember it like it was yesterday. Life was good living together with the whole family. There was me, Mom, Dad, and my 2 little brothers. I was the oldest child in the family. Being the oldest child means having responsibilities. I remember I used to help my mother around the house. I practically raised my 2 little brothers. They are not so little anymore. Life was easy back then. We were happy and grateful for what we had. We were grateful for our little village and all its good. We took care of our lands, and the grounds thanked us by giving us food. Fruits of all kinds. I remember how much we loved our animals, our big, healthy cows. I was only 16-year-old, but I was fearless. I remember wanting to ride our horses, but my dad never let me. Winters back then were never easy. But it was that season that brought us all together in one room. The winters were so cold, and we used to all sleep together. We didn't know that something terrible would happen during the coldest days of winter. As far as I remember, it was morning, and we were staying inside our house when suddenly we heard people screaming. We didn't even have the chance to look through the window and see what was happening. My father came running and said that the military forces had gotten into our villages. I am pretty sure that I didn't even understand what my father had said back then. But, judging by how his face looked and how his voice sounded, I knew that something terrible was going to happen to us. I remember my mother running fast, getting clothes and some little food. My little brothers were crying their eyes out. I remember I was so scared. We took as many things as possible in such a little time and got outside the house. I wish we didn't get outside of our house. I wish I could delete the memory when I looked at all the people that lived in the village. Everyone was crying and screaming. Some babies were just born. Some people were sick and could barely walk. I remember that some couldn't find their loved ones. They were screaming their names so loud, desperately. The military forces had forced our village to move and cross the border. That time I didn't know what it meant. But we just kept walking, not knowing what to do or where to go. We thought that we should follow the crowd. We had worn 2 jackets each, but still, it was one of the coldest days since I can remember. We were walking, not knowing that that would be the last time we would be together in our village. I remember myself crying because we had left all the animals behind us. Even the animals were shouting and screaming, and even they knew that something was not all right. We were walking and walking till we couldn't feel our legs. The mountains of our villages were full of snow and ice, making it harder to walk. I remember like it was yesterday. My feet were so cold because the water had already got into my boots. At that time, my little 2 brothers were only 10-year-old and 8-year-old. My 8-year-old brother, Tommy, cried non-stop, and I carried him because I felt terrible. I didn't want to cause stress to my parents because they were already very anxious. That day, I remember seeing my father crying for the first time. It broke my heart because he had never cried before in front of us. And, seeing a man crying like that, like a child, my eyes are full of tears just thinking about that. As we were walking and following the crowd, our parents had written some stuff on our arms. As I remember, they had written our names, birth names, and the village we were in. They used to do this just in case we went missing or something. This made us even more scared and anxious. I remember that just the thought of getting separated from my family would make me go insane. After some hours of walking, I remember that we got in a truck. That truck could barely fit all of us. We were more than 100 people. We were holding hands non-stop because you could literally get lost in that truck. I remember that I could hear a thing my parents were saying. Everyone was crying and screaming. All of a sudden, the truck had stopped. I remember us thinking that the truck had problems, and that we had to stop. But, no, the military forces were there and had stopped the truck. The military forces made everyone get out of the truck and separated us into 2 groups. We were separated from our parents. They took my mother and father and then told the truck driver to go. To this day, this was the most challenging moment of my life. I couldn't hold the tears and be strong for my 2 little brothers. I broke down, luckily enough. An older woman was there in the truck and tried to make me feel less worried. I remember every word she said to me. Don't worry, they will be back. To this day, she still was one of the kindest women I've ever met. She used to say that if we didn't find our parents, she wouldn't leave us alone. She would take us with her. And this made me feel better and safe for a while. I wish I could find her and thank her because she said things I needed to wear, and things I wanted to hear. The drive was long, and we got hungry. We had a backpack that my parents had packed for us. There was bread and a bottle of water. We shared that with my 2 little brothers, pieces to pieces, but that wasn't enough. It had been 1 day since we hadn't seen our parents and we were worried. I didn't know if they were dead or alive. I didn't know where they were and if they had eaten anything. I remember not sleeping at all, scared if the military forces were going to separate me from my little brothers. They were my responsibility now. We had welcomed a new day, and that older woman had given us some food. To this day, I still don't know what we would do if this older woman didn't give us something to eat. We would starve. I remember what the people used to talk about in that truck. They said that we would all die. I used to cover my little brother's ears so they couldn't hear anything. Then, some good news. Someone shouted, saying that we had arrived at the border and were ready to cross it. They told us to change to different vehicles, so we did. I took my little brother and went into a giant truck. There were people there, and all of the people there, I noticed a face. It was my mother. I couldn't believe my eyes. I shouted with all my lungs and said her name. She came into us running, and we just started hugging. And this was one of the best moments of that time until I had asked my mother something. I asked about my father and where he was. I remember her crying and saying that she didn't know where Dad was. She had said that the military forces had separated them into 2 groups, females and males, and that she hadn't seen him since the day we all got separated. We shouted his name and looked everywhere to see if we could find him. But we didn't. We got in the truck together with my mother, and then we crossed the border. We had no other choice but hope to see our father after crossing the border. We thought that maybe he would be there, waiting for us. The drive was long and sad. I remember that we couldn't keep our minds off our father. Where was he? Was he okay? Was he hungry? After we crossed the border, we had asked around about my father, but we couldn't find him. We asked our military forces too. They kept saying that he would be back tomorrow. But tomorrow came, and my father wasn't there. They kept saying us the same words, over and over again, that he would be back tomorrow. Days went by, but we couldn't miss a day without searching for him. Then, we found out that we weren't the only ones searching for someone. Parents were searching for their kids. Kids were searching for their parents. Someone said that the military forces had killed them, but I remember not accepting this option. We weren't safe to go back to our village, so a family had sheltered us. We had stayed there for a month. We ate and slept there. That family had helped us a lot. They were a big family, but they never insisted on getting us food. They were so generous. As far as I remember, their names were Anna and Sakal. They had been married for years and had 8 children together. I remember the months that I spent there made me feel like I was at home. They had a farm, and they had animals, just like we did. It made me feel like everything was all right. Their children were so friendly and kind. I remember that the war and the winter were already over, and we would just spend hours outside playing like everything was just fine. But then, I'd watch my mother's face and see how sad she was. They even offered to help us find my father, but there was no success. By that time, it had been almost 2 months, and we still hadn't heard from our father. It was time that we went home. To our bed, to our animals, to our old life back. I remember the ride back home, and I remember how sad it was. It was like we were leaving our father behind. Our last hope was that our father would have been there when we arrived at our village. He would have fed the chickens and the cows, he would have made our bed, and he would have been waiting for us. We had arrived at our village, and nothing felt the same anymore. The spring had sprung. I remember the trees of our village and how green they had been. The mountains looked breathtaking, and at that moment, I realized how much I loved and missed my village. However, the military forces had burnt our houses to the ground. There were no memories left, just ashes. And our animals had left. And the sad part of all this was that our father wasn't there. We had asked some of the neighbors if they had seen him, but nobody had seen where he was. Many of our neighbors were not found, and some of them were announced dead. We had to start our lives from the start. Without you, Dad. To this day, we still don't know your fate, but we pray for you every day. We don't know if you are alive or somewhere searching for us, but all I know is that we miss and think about you every day of our lives. We were lucky to survive, but my life has never been the same again without you, Dad. When humans start wars, they don't know the consequences. They don't know how precious life is until it is lost. A war can never make peace. A war can never make someone a winner. All it does is create a mess and bring the destruction of humanity. My name is Beatrix, and I just wanted to tell a story about what happened 2 years ago in my life. A lot has happened in 2 years. 2 years ago, I was only 16-year-old. Life was not easy. I grew up in a very toxic household. I grew up with my parents fighting all the time. I don't know if there was a day when my parents didn't fight about something. But, when it came to me, they were completely different people. My parents are the sweetest parents anyone could ever ask for. They care about me. They love me. I am their only child. I was spoiled and loved like no other. But, sometimes, love is not just enough. Marriage is not just about love. Marriage is about commitment, and being responsible for what you do and say. Communication is key, but my parents didn't have that. I was only 16-year-old, but I was old enough to notice that they didn't know how to communicate with each other. My parents always fought, but I knew that it wasn't that serious until one day. I remember it like it was yesterday. I got woken up from the sound of my mother screaming to my father. My father came home late the other night, and my mother had found out that he cheated. My mother decided to file for divorce, even though my dad begged her to stay. I remember I felt so bad for my mother. No woman deserves to get cheated on. They decided not to live together anymore. One day they had asked me a very important question. They asked me if I'd choose to stay with my mother or with my father. I loved them equally. I mean, they are my parents. But, the one that got cheated on was my mother. I couldn't be the one to let her down too. Plus, my mother had always been like a father too. She has always been there for me. So, that's what I did. I chose my mother. We left home. At that time, my mother didn't have a job. We had no job and nowhere to live. The only person that we could call to help us was my grandmother. My grandmother lived alone, so we had the opportunity to live there for some months until we figured some things out. Living at my grandma's house was fun. My mother was searching for a job. So, she was always out doing job interviews. Most of the time, I was home only with my grandmother. I loved her cooking. She cooked with love. She had told me some of her secret recipes. We would talk for hours. She would tell me about her life when she was a teenager and how much she missed my grandpa. I felt safe at my grandmother's house. The vibes were different. But, during that time, my mother was in a terrible place. My father had always been wealthy. When we went to the court, he won everything. His lawyers helped him take all of his wealth for himself, and not give anything to my mother or me. My father was almost making me go with him. But, I was old enough to choose. To this day, I still don't regret going with my mother. My father had shown his true colors. If he really loved us, he would help us and give us some money. At least for a good start. My mother struggled to find a job, and I remember feeling so bad. She was trying so hard. I remember wanting to quit school to work something and help her. But she didn't let me. She always said that I should work hard and finish school to be independent. Months went by, and my mother still hadn't gotten a job. At that time, my mother had turned into a whole different person. She was angry at life, at everything. Even at 16-year-old, I understood that she felt like everyone had let her down. At some point, she was ready to give up. She stopped going to job interviews. I remember how she didn't even want to get a bath. She was deep in depression, and she always used to fight with my grandmother. My mother used to put the anger that she had on my grandmother. One day, they got into a huge pointless argument, and my mother had enough. My grandmother was crying, saying that we didn't need to go. But, my mother thought that this would be for the better. This way, my mother would try harder and not give up so easily. My grandmother gave us our grandfather's old car. She couldn't drive anymore, so she thought we would put it to good use. She gave us her car, food, clothes and some money. It was winter, and we had no idea where to go. I remember us driving with no destination. It was snowing so much. It was almost Christmas time. It should have been the most wonderful time of the year. But, not this time. We drove and drove. We didn't know where to go, and we hadn't much money with us. It was the middle of the night, and we got tired. We found a mountain not so far from the city, and we decided to park the car there and stay the night. We shouldn't even have parked there. We would have been arrested. But, we had no other choice. I remember I was so scared to sleep in the car. We were scared if someone would knock in our windows and try to kidnap us or something. I hadn't had much sleep on the first night, but then I got used. But, the car was a blessing. Without it, we would be sleeping on the streets in the cold. We lived in our car for almost 2 weeks. It was the most challenging time of our lives. At that time, I wasn't going to school anymore. So, we kind of just stayed and hoped that my mother could find a job. I missed my bed, and I missed having a hot shower. It had been days that I hadn't had a proper meal. We used to eat cheap fast food with the bit of money that our grandmother gave us. The nights were so cold, and we used to sleep hugging each other. I remember asking my mother to go back to our grandmother's house, but my mother just wanted to make it alone. Even though we lived in the car, she never lost a job interview. I remember how she used to play it off at times like everything was all right, and how she used to sing and dance, to not make me feel worried. But, I knew that deep inside, she was sad and anxious until, one day, one perfect day, I was staying in the car, and I saw my mother by the window. She told me some good news. She said that she had got a job at a restaurant, and she will start working from tomorrow. My mother told the restaurant owner about our life, our situation, and he said that we could sleep there. At his restaurant. Our life was about to be changed forever, and we just didn't know it yet. We took our car and drove there. The restaurant was so beautiful and comfy. We met with the boss. My mother's boss was so generous and kind, and he was named Mitchell. He had asked me how school was going, but I told him that I couldn't afford school right now. I told him that I wanted to work and help my mother. He accepted that, and he had made me an assistant. I worked as my mother's assistant. Life was beautiful during that time. I could finally have some good sleep and eat some warm, good meal. I woke up early, worked, and had met some beautiful people. It felt good living and having a routine. It had been 2 years since my mother and I worked at the restaurant. I could tell that my mother was happy. I was happy too. During our time working at Mitchell's restaurant, something beautiful had happened. Love had happened. My mother fell in love with her boss, Mitchell. Who wouldn't love Mitchell? He was so kind and gentle, and he had helped us a lot. He became like my father in such a short time. He had never been married before because he had always been busy with his restaurant. But he loved my mother more than anyone before. He loved kids, and he treated me like I was his daughter. However, my mother's goal now is to be independent. She knew what she went through when she got divorced. She doesn't want to make that mistake again. For those 2 years that we had been working, my mother and I saved money. Since my mother always wanted to have something on her own, we decided to open a coffee shop. We thought it would be a great idea since I wasn't going to school during that time. I wanted to take a break and just kind of put our life together. Plus, my mother needed my help. We were excited about this, and we had decided to tell Mitchell. Even though we wouldn't be working at his restaurant, we loved the idea. He said that that's okay and that we should follow our dreams. And that's what we did. We followed our dreams. New York has the most beautiful places and views, so it was easy for us to find a place to open our coffee shop. Mitchell had helped us a lot. He had helped us with painting the walls of our store. We decided to give the store a vintage look, and it turned out so good. The coffee shop was so small, but it was so cute. The coffee shop had large windows, and you could see everything that was happening outside. It's a place where you could bring your favorite book and just read for hours while drinking your coffee. Our coffee shop is open 24/7. I work there as a waiter, and I love it. At first, it was just my mother and me, but now we have 4 employees. All of our 4 employees are females. Our employees are women that needed help, just like we did. It feels good helping people. I know how it feels to need help and not get any. Every day is a good day at our coffee shop. Every day we meet new beautiful people, and I have made a lot of friends. After some time, my mother and Mitchell decided not to waste time and have a wedding. It was one of the most beautiful weddings that I have ever seen. It felt good seeing my mother in a white dress and happy. Maybe it is time for me to have a brother or a sister. Who knows? My mother and I often visit the grandmother. They are on good terms now. We had given her car back, even though she insisted on not to. But we wanted to leave everything that reminded us of bad times. My grandmother comes to our coffee shop almost every day. She says that my coffee is her favorite coffee to drink. I am going to school now, after that big break. Every day after school, I come here to our coffee shop, and I help my mother. Are you curious about what happened with my father? Well, I don't know what happened with him. We hadn't heard from him since my mother filed the divorce. He hadn't even called to see if we were okay. But that doesn't matter. We are okay now. Better than never. I just wanted to share my story and say that life works in very unpredictable ways, and that you should never give up. Life has its ups and downs, and that's the beauty of it. We should embrace the good and the bad times.
This story takes place in the heart of France, Paris. Paris is one of the most romantic places ever to exist. They call it the city of love. Is it really, though? I am Iris, and this month I'll be turning 18-year-old. I was born, and I have lived all my life in Paris. When talking about Paris, the thing that comes to our mind is Eiffel Tower, streets crowded with tourists, beautiful little coffee shops, and the list goes on. However, what people don't know is that one of Paris's best-kept secrets is the countryside. That's where I live. It's a tiny piece of heaven tucked away in the 20th arrondissement of Paris known as La Campagne, Paris. I love where I live. The views are straight from a movie. Each building is unique and quirky with gentle pastel colors and paved, cobbled paths. It's nothing like the rest of Paris. In a good way. Life is easy here. My school is only some blocks away from my house. My friends' houses are near too. But the most awkward thing about where I live is that my neighbor is my ex-boyfriend. His name is Louis. Louis was great and everything that a girl could ask for. A great smile, tall, respectful. But he was too good. When I see that the person I'm dating is way too much into me, I tend to stand back. We never argued, and there was never drama. And this kind of makes me get bored of it. I want my relationship to be exciting, with ups and downs, as it should be. I want someone to disagree with me, not just agree with everything I say, like they don't have an opinion on their own. However, I don't know if I can call him my ex-boyfriend because it was more like just a summer fling. We dated the whole of last summer. I get a feeling that he is still not over me. But what can I do? I get bored so easily. And it's actually a serious problem. Do you know that feeling when you are in summer and feel so vulnerable? You feel like you are free to do anything. A new hair color, a new tattoo, a new piercing. Sometimes even a new boyfriend. Ugh, I miss summer right now. Winters can be so depressive. And I can't even wear what I want to wear. I love wearing crop tops and letting my stomach out a little bit. This is the last year of high school. Next year, God knows where I'll be because I still don't even know what I want to study in college. However, I am excited for this year. We have prom, and also I have to pass my driving license. I hope Louis doesn't ask me to be his prom date because that would be awkward. I don't know about the country you live in, but prom is usually the night for couples to lose their virginities here. I wouldn't wait for prom night, but I still haven't found someone special yet. Call me old-fashioned, but I don't want to lose my virginity with someone like Louis. For example, I aspire to have some deep-level connections with someone. Every day is the same day at our school. It's like déjà vu. All over again. But, one day, one random Thursday, a new boy came into my class. He walked and then sat without even starting at anyone. He was tall, dark-skinned, curly hair. The teacher made him introduce himself. Apparently, his name is Aaron. During the lunch break, all the girls were all over him. I knew this would happen. But, I am not this kind of girl. I like to look uninterested. That's my secret to making someone interested in me. Days went by, and we didn't even talk. But, I could notice some stares here and there. I saw how he was talking to the other girls. And I could tell that he wasn't just like any other guy. He was mysterious until one day. Aaron decided to come out of his shell and actually talk to me. He goes, "Where can I eat something good around here?" I told him about my favorite place where I get food every day. He said, "Wanna ditch the classes and go eat something?" How could I say no? I wanted to know about this guy. He said to meet outside. I went outside of school. And here he was, waiting for me. Smiling. We started walking and talking. There was a vibe already. We go into the store and sit on the corner by the window. Then he orders for me without even asking what I'd want. He said, "Trust me." That was attractive. We talked about our favorite movies, our first kisses and so on. I didn't notice how many hours had passed until my mother called me. We decided to leave. He put his hand around my waist and whispered in my ear, "See ya." My walk home had me questioning myself. Why didn't he ask for my number? Guys usually ask for my number immediately. Maybe he truly was different from the other guys. It had been days since our little date. And we didn't even share a word at school. I was avoiding him in the hallway at this point. Then, someone texted me. A text said, "Same spot. At 2 p.m. Was that Aaron? Well, yeah, for sure. I was in a dilemma about going or not. I decided to go there. He was sitting on the same spot as that day. I went inside, and he gave me a little kiss on the cheek. It got me off guard. He had already ordered for me again. This time, he asked if I had a boyfriend. And I said no. I didn't ask him. And he said, "Don't you want to know if I have a girlfriend?" I said, "Do you?" He said not yet and started smiling. Aaron said, "You're gonna go to prom with me." And started smiling. I didn't say anything. I just laughed it off, trying to play it cool. He was staying a little bit too near me. I could smell his perfume. And I could feel the warmth of his breath as he was talking to me. At this point, I just wanted him to kiss me. But he didn't. That's how our second date ended. As I was walking home, I saw Louis, the ex. He said that he wanted to talk to me. And I said sure. He started holding my hand, asking me to go to prom with him. I said no and told him that I'd made plans with someone else. He seemed angry and wanted to know who the guy was. "Why would you care?" I said. He said that he wanted to know so he could fight the guy. I immediately started laughing. But he seemed to be talking seriously. Knowing that Louis probably still loves me, I was worried. I was worried about what would happen. I didn't want anything to affect my relationship with Aaron. We had a good start. It was almost prom night. And everyone was starting to freak out. I still didn't have any idea of what I was gonna wear. As I talked with my girls about some dresses, I got a text. Aaron had texted me saying, "Meet me after school." So, that's what I did. We met. He said that today we're going to find our prom outfits. At first, I was like no. But then he got me into it. We went to a couple of stores. And nothing. It was my time to try for some dresses. He was the one picking the dresses for me. Every time I went out from the wardrobe with a dress, Aaron had this look on his face. It was clear that he liked me. There was a lot of tension between us. We both could feel it. Then, I came across a black dress with an open leg. I tried it, and I loved it. It was time to show it to Aaron. You should have seen his face. He was speechless. He came near me and said, "This is the one," and kissed me. I think my cheeks got red for a second. Then, it was his turn to try for a suit. Every time he was trying suits, he would come out shirtless. He was showing off. But I loved it. We got our clothes, and I could say that it was one of the best dates I've ever been with. The day of the prom came, and here I was, getting ready. Aaron was waiting outside my house. But then he came inside because he wanted to say hi to my parents. He was looking so good. I just wanted to kiss him, but I couldn't in front of my parents. The moment we got in the car, we gave each other a little kiss. We arrived at prom, and everyone was looking at us. I heard that Louis couldn't find a date. I saw him. He was standing in a corner alone. I felt bad for a second. Hours went by, and Aaron and I were having the best time. Aaron is so easy to stay with. As we were slow dancing, I saw Louis coming at us. He pushed Aaron to the ground. Aaron seemed confused. He didn't know who Louis was. He heard me saying, "Louis, stop." Aaron said, "You know this fool," and then he punched him in the face. The security got us out, and I was shaking. I told him who Louis was, but he didn't seem to care. He was just worried if I was okay. So, basically, Louis got so jealous he decided to do this. But he didn't ruin our prom night. Things just got better from there. I realized how mature Aaron is and that I could love him. We weren't allowed to get back at prom. So we got to the car. Aaron said, "I got an idea. Let's get to my place." He said that he was home alone. It was too early to end this night. So we went to his home. We stayed in our prom outfits and decided to watch a movie. He was touching my hair and kissing my forehead. We both fell asleep in that way. We got up at the sound of my mother calling me. So, he drove me home. As I was walking to the door of my house, I saw Louis there. He was talking to my parents. What could he be saying? Sorry for last night. He better be. I got closer, and I noticed that my parents were angry. My mother said to me, "Get in the house," as Louis ran to his home. Apparently, Louis told my parents that I spent my night at a guy's house. How could he know? He probably stalked us. He is a psycho. I had no other solution than to tell my parents the truth. If I told them that I didn't do anything bad, they still wouldn't believe me. They said to me, "You're grounded." They took my phone and said that I wasn't allowed to go out before and after school. How could I keep in touch with Aaron? I was so mad at Louis. I bagged the door and fell asleep. The next day came. It felt like forever. I was excited to meet with Aaron. We meet up, and I tell him everything that has happened. He said that he wanted to fight Louis, but I begged him not to. Aaron said that it's for the best if he goes and talks with my parents. He insisted. I said, "All right, why not?" I told my mother that Aaron wanted to talk to them, and she asked me to call him for dinner at our house. So, that is what we did. My parents seemed to love him. Well, who couldn't love him? We had so much fun. My mother said that it's okay if I sleep over at Aaron's since his parents are working at night. I was surprised she let me. But I guess they noticed what kind of a guy Aaron is. So, we went to his house. We both could sense that we felt a little nervous, like something would happen. We started kissing, and then he went, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I kissed him instead of an answer. Things led to another, and we did it. We were closer than never now. I felt safe. We said our first, I love yous. I love the fact that he was the first one that said it. Even though we are in our teenage years. I know for sure that love will always be between us two. We are excited to see what life brings ahead of us. There's nothing better than being free, young, and in love.
Hi, I'm Emma, and I live in a small city where people are not too much because I love to live a low-key life, and I so much love keeping to myself. My parents complained several times about this type of attitude that I've cultivated, but that's just me. So as time goes on, they have to take me for who I am. So they already know the type of girl I am, so they always let me be at all time. I'm so much quiet and reserved. I'm not the type of person who likes games or do too much on the daily activities, but I like reading novels and watching a lot of movies, especially comedy movies, because since I already choose to keep to myself, I have to find a means of catching fun by myself. I attend a high school class where students have the choice to do what they like and want. Whenever I'm in class, I'm always reserved and quiet, always. But I do have friends who always love to force words out of my mouth whenever they are around me. I love going to school every day, if not for anything but for the sake of seeing my friends, because I will surely talk whenever I'm around them. On this beautiful morning when I got to class, I noticed a letter was dropped inside my locker, which was so unusual. I decided to open the letter after the class, but while the teacher was in class teaching, all my mind was on was the letter that was dropped inside my locker. Immediately when the teacher left the class, I opened it, and what I discovered was a love letter, which I did not know who dropped it there. I tried to pay so much attention to every guy I came in contact with in class so as to get who dropped the letter, but it was not too available. After a long period of staying in class during the break hour, my friends came to my seat to meet me, and then they all said we should go outside to get something. On our way out, some guys came our way, and trying to get our attention at first, I looked at all of them, thinking maybe it might be one of them that cultivated the habit of dropping the sticky note inside my locker. But with all their facial expressions, I don't think any of them can do such. They tried stopping us, not moving any step out of there, and all we just have to do is to comply. But all of a sudden, a teacher decided to come our way. Then immediately they noticed that the teacher was coming our way. They all left instantly, and we proceeded in getting what we wanted to go by. I told my friends about the sticky note I discovered inside my locker that morning, and they all laughed at me, saying maybe a guy has been stalking me all this while. They then said that one of us should try coming to school very early so that the guy can be caught. But that guy that dropped the sticky note is just too smart and expert. We tried for days, but we could not get the guy, so I told the ladies to forget the issue, that I'm very sure that one day he will surely reveal his identity. As time goes on, it became a regular routine. Every blessed morning when I get to my seat, I will surely find a sticky note with a love quote inside my locker. At some point, I got annoyed and frustrated, but there's no point yelling because I did not know who was doing such a thing. So I decided to stomach it, and I did not tell it to anyone. One day during school hour, a teacher at school was explaining to us a physics experiment, and he made it as a game because he wanted all the students to participate and be carried along. During this process, all students participating closed their eyes and tasted, perceived, and some liquids to tell what it is based on their taste. It was quite fun because all students were carried along for the first time at school, and we all laughed where someone guessed wrong because we all gave various answers, knowing fully well that our tasting boards are different. I really enjoyed the class that day because it was so much different. The following day in class was Friday, so a group of people in class came together and discussed that we should have a get-together party on Saturday, which is the following day. So they asked the whole class about their opinion concerning the party. To my surprise, everyone was happy to hear that they all turned in. Well, as for me, having a get-together party on Saturday, though the plan was a little bit awkward to me, because I don't really like associating myself with things like that, because I so much love keeping to myself. A venue was picked, and all planned was so fascinating and lovely. Actually, I love the plan because I want to see how it will look for the first time by the beach side, so I decided to hang out that day. When I got home that day, I told my mom about the plan of going to the beach the following day. She was so happy to hear that because she's never seen me going out before. So that night, my mom came into my room and went directly to my wardrobe to select the clothes I will be putting on the following day. When it comes to selecting clothes for an event, my mom is very good at it, and she so much loves me looking good and cute, always. So the day finally came. I woke up so late, maybe because I slept late checking out the clothes my mom was picking for me to wear. I had to rush to the bathroom to have my bath so as to dress up to meet with the event, knowing fully well that I'm late already. After having my bath, I dressed up, looking cute and pretty for the event. After dressing up, I set out for the party immediately. So finally, I got to the venue a little bit late. And trust me, just as planned, all eyes were on me, because I was so much looking gorgeous and pretty. After getting there, a guy named Sean in my class ran towards me to give me a long hug and a peck. After he did that, I was so shy to take a step away from where I was standing. But from the look of things, he's been a long-time crush. Throughout the party, Sean was all over me, because that will be the first time he will have the opportunity of talking to me and expressing himself. We both have a walk together, and he told me a lot of things about me which I was so surprised to hear. Then I knew he has been the guy stalking me. Actually, Sean has been the guy dropping all those sticky notes with love quotes under my locker. At first, when he told me he was the one, I was so mad with him. Then I told him that he's a coward. If not, he would have come to me himself and not by note. Then he said he did not know what I was going to say because he did not want to be too forward. Then we both smiled and laughed together. Then we moved on with the party. We hung out and made a walk through a beach and had fun, and then we all decided to go to a friend's apartment. So a small group of us went into the apartment, and here comes the idea to play a blind taste game. Similarly with a game we once played at school. I was so anxious to play the game, but at the same time, I didn't want to join. I simply refused, but then I thought of it that I am the one who is really good in tasting things and smell very good, so I later decided to participate in the end. So as usual, the game started and was getting more interesting and fun, but still yet throughout this period, Sean did not leave my side for once. Well, he might be thinking he might not have this type of opportunity again. So everyone's turn during the game came and went, and here it comes my turn. So a guy closed my eyes and pushed my head towards the object. So I tried to perceive the object. I was not getting it. Then I tried touching it with my nose. At first it was a strong object as I touched it with my nose a bit and said, "It's a pen," as it does not smell at all. They all smiled. And then I was wondering what could it be. I then gave another try, but the object this time was softer. I was then surprised, thinking within me, maybe the object has been changed. But then I asked if they changed the object, and changing the object is outside of game rules. They all said no, that it's still the same object, and I thought, what could it be? But I had no answer. After a little moment of thinking, I grabbed the object with my hand to know what the shape of the object looks like. Then I feel it was a tall object, similar to cylinder, and I immediately opened my eyes. I was so much afraid because it is something inappropriate. When I opened my eyes, what I saw was simply a banana, which was so different to what I felt when my eyes were closed and everyone was laughing at me. I was annoyed, and only Sean could notice it then. He came to walk me home. He explained to me that it was a banana, but still yet, I disagree. I just told him to close the discussion. When I got back home, I greeted my mom with a weird look on my face. Then I went straight to my room. She gave me some minutes to be by myself before she came to meet me. Then she asked me what happened at the party. Then I narrated everything to her, not leaving behind the aspect where Sean came to give me a long hug and a peck. She told me not to be annoyed about the game, though I have forgotten about how I felt during the game period because the thought of Sean is now all over me. So Mom asked me to gist her about Sean. So I did, and we all laughed and I was happy all through the night. When I got back to school, I discovered that I did not see the sticky note as usual. Then I looked straight down to Sean's seat, and then I saw him smiling. Then I laughed as Phil. So the class started and immediately the teacher came in. Then every other student told the teacher about everything that happened to me at the party, and they laughed. But then the teacher said to me, he will call me one day and tell me a secret behind this game. Then he left the class, but within me I am still not sure if the object was banana at first, or they changed the object during the game, as it softened and changed, and I am still confused, and I will never play that game again. This is the reason why I didn't want to participate in the game earlier. See what it all turns out to be? Please let me know in the comments if you think they've changed the object, or am I just thinking wrong?
This is an interesting story that has suspense, betrayal, revenge, and many other things in it. It shows how the thinking of humans can be different. It is fun-filled and action-packed. Sit back and enjoy what the story has to offer. My mom and dad got married in a fashionable style. The marriage attracted the big personalities around the neighborhood and from all spheres of life. The wedding was the talk of the town then, as I was told. My mom was an actress while my dad is a politician. Because of their personalities and celebrity status, they were able to attract the big personalities in the country. My dad's political colleagues and my mom's colleagues in the film industry made the wedding very elaborate. It took 4 years after the wedding for my mom to give birth to me. My mom and dad had issues for 3 years after the wedding when there was no child. They carried out a series of tests and they were told by the doctors that there is nothing wrong with both of them. It was in the 4th year when my mom became pregnant that they stopped having issues. 9 months after, my mom gave birth to me. My mom and dad put the differences that they had aside and celebrated my birth elaborately. Famous artists were invited to come and thrill the guests that attended my ceremony. After my birth, my mom was not 100% good. Today she is at home and the next day she is in the hospital. Sometimes, my father would be at the office when he will receive a call from the neighbors that my mom is sick. He will rush from his office to take her to the hospital. When the sickness continued with no hope of a permanent cure in sight, the doctors advised my dad to look for a domestic worker. The doctors aid my mom's condition warrants that she does not do any difficult work. My mom had to stop her acting career because of her health. When my dad got home, he told my mom what the doctors told him. He told her that he has contacted one of his friends to help him get a domestic worker. My mom said she doesn't want a domestic worker. She said she can do her things herself. She told my dad that she has stopped acting so that she can rest and have time to take of the home. My dad insisted that he cannot go against the advice of the doctor. He reminded my mom how he used to receive calls from neighbors while in his office because of her health. He said, what if they don't have neighbors or neighbors are not at home? He asked what would have happened to her. He said who knows if she might have passed on before he comes back from the office. When my mom realized that my dad was not ready to yield to her demand, she told my dad that she would get the domestic worker herself. The opinion of my dad kept my mom in deep thought. She didn't want anyone in her home. But as things stand, it seems she doesn't have any option. For hours, she thought of what to do. When she couldn't figure out what to do, she decided to call her friend Mrs. Isabella. Mrs. Isabella was my mom's old friend. Their friendship dates back to primary school. They went to the same primary school and high school. After they graduated from high school, they got admission into the same college to study the same course. They graduated in the same year and both of them were the best students in their class. So, they were very close. It was their marriage that separated them. Mrs. Isabella got married to a pilot. After their marriage, her husband got a job offer outside the United States of America. So, she had to leave the United States. When my mom called Mrs. Isabella, she was not with her phone. Therefore, she did not answer the call. After calling her thrice without any response, my mom dropped her phone on the table and lied down on the couch. She was fast asleep when she heard her phone ringing. Before she could open her eyes, the call ended. When she checked her phone, she saw that the call was from Mrs. Isabella. She returned the call immediately. This time, Mrs. Isabella responded swiftly. When she answered the call, she and my mom discussed a lot of things. It was when she asked my mom about her marriage that she noticed that something was not right. When she noticed how my mom was acting on the phone, Mrs. Isabella was forced to ask my mom what the problem was. My mom told Mrs. Isabella that she has not been 100% fit since she gave birth to me. She said it has been from one hospital to another. She said sometimes it is the neighbors that usually call her husband at work to come and rush her to the hospital. She said in one of their visits to the hospital, the doctor advised her husband to get her a domestic worker. She said at first, she declined the idea of having a domestic worker, but it seems her husband is not ready to listen to her. She said her husband is hell-bent on following the instruction of the doctor. She said she needs Mrs. Isabella's advice. Mrs. Isabella's paused for some seconds. She didn't know what to say. My mom had to ask her if she was still on the phone. Mrs. Isabella said she doesn't subscribe to the idea of having a domestic worker, but since her health warrants that she gets one, she thinks that is the best option. Mrs. Isabella said her advice is that my mom should bring her younger sister to stay with her instead of getting a domestic worker. She said she thinks that is a better option. My mom did not even think about that option before. Therefore, when Mrs. Isabella mentioned it, it came as a relief for her. She thanked Mrs. Isabella for her advice and she ended the call. As soon as my mom ended the call, she lied on the couch. She was weighing both options, the option of getting a house help and the option of bringing in her younger sister to live with her. At last, she decided to go with Mrs. Isabella's opinion, which was to bring in her younger sister to come and stay with her. She lied on the couch waiting for my dad to return from work. When my dad returned from the office, he met her lying on the couch. She didn't even know when he entered. It was when I ran to my dad to welcome him that my mom woke up. When she woke up, my dad asked her why she slept on the couch instead of sleeping in her room. My mom said she just decided to lie on the couch. She said she didn't know when she slept off. After my dad ate his food, he was about to walk into his room when my mom called him. She said she has something important to discuss with him if he doesn't mind. My dad said he is very tired, but since she says it is something important, he has no option. He walked back to the sitting room and sat close to my mom on the couch. He asked her in a soft voice, "What do you want to tell me?" My mom said since he told her that he wants to get a domestic worker, she has been thinking of what to do. My dad quickly interjected. He said he isn't getting her a domestic worker on his wish. He said he is following the instructions of the doctor. He said he has known the doctor for many years and he trusts his judgment. He said if tomorrow the doctor calls him and tells him that she is medically fit and she doesn't need a domestic worker, he will change his opinion. He said, for now, he doesn't have any option. My mom said she understood that my dad is trying to protect her. She said she knows how challenging her health is. She said she is ready to welcome a domestic worker. My father smiled. He said everything he is doing is for her good. My dad said he is still waiting to hear from his friend on the issue of the domestic worker he told him. My mom said he shouldn't bother calling his friend anymore. She said she has gotten a solution. She said instead of bringing in a stranger to come and live with them, she has decided to bring in her sister to stay with them. My dad smiled. He said that is a good idea. He asked my mom whether she has informed her younger sister. She said that is the first thing she will do the next morning. My dad kissed my mom on her forehead and walked straight to his room. The next morning, when my dad was leaving for work, he told my mom not to forget to call her sister. As soon as my dad left, my mom put a call across to her younger sister. She called her sister thrice, but she didn't answer the call. When her sister wasn't answering her call, she called her mother to ask about her sister. When she called her mother, she answered the call immediately. She greeted her mother. Her mom said it's been a while she heard from her. She asked her if she is fine. My mom told her mom that she is not fine. As soon as her mom heard that, she became worried. My mom told her mom about her reoccurring illness. She told her mom that the doctor advised her husband to get a domestic worker. She said she has been thinking of it since her husband told her. She said her husband has called one of his friends to help him get a domestic worker, but she has told him that she doesn't want an insider. Her mom asked her what she wants to do. She said she has decided that her sister should come and stay with her until she becomes healthier. My mom asked her if she has discussed it with her younger sister. She said she hasn't. She said she has been calling her but she is not answering her call. Her mom said her younger sister went out but she doesn't know whether she went with her phone. She told my mom to stay on the phone while she checks her room. Her mom went to her younger sister's room to check on her. Unfortunately, she saw her phone in her room. She told my mom that her younger sister's phone is in her room. Her mom said she will notify her when her younger sister returns. She told her to call back when her younger sister returns because she wants her to tell her sister herself. 30 minutes later, my mom's younger sister returned from where she went to. As soon as she returned, my grandma notified my mom through a text message. 5 minutes later, she called her younger sister. Her younger sister was in the sitting room when she heard her phone ringing in her room. She hurried to her room to check who was calling her. As soon as she picked her phone on the bed, she saw my mom's number on her screen. She was very happy to see my mom's call because it's been a long time she spoke to my mom. She hurriedly answered the call and screamed on the phone. She accused my mom of not calling her for months. My mom had no option but to apologize to her. My mom told her that she has been calling her phone since morning, but she wasn't answering. She said she left her phone in her room when she went out. She said she didn't enter her room when she returned until she heard her phone ringing. She said there was no way she would have seen the missed calls. My mom told my sister that she called because she has something very important to discuss with her. Her sister said she knew that she doesn't call without a reason. She asked her what is that important that made her call repeatedly. She started in a sympathetic way to buy her sister over. She told her about her reoccurring illness. She told her how her husband usually rushes home to take her to the hospital. She told her how she had to stop acting too because of her health. She told her about the doctor's advice to her husband. She said the main reason that she called is that she doesn't want her husband to get a domestic worker because she doesn't want an outsider in her house. She said you can never tell what an outsider will have in mind. She said she wants her to live with her in her house. She said her presence will lift her and make her health condition better. My mom's younger sister remained silent for a few seconds. She didn't buy the idea of living with my mom, but my mom's story touched her heart. For minutes, she was still silent. My mom had to ask if she was still with her. My mom's younger sister said it's not an idea she supports, but she cannot say no to my mom. She said she will come over. She said she will tell her when she will be coming in a few days. My mom could not hide her joy. She appreciated her younger sister. She prayed for two before she ended the call. As soon as she ended the call, she called my grandma to inform her about her discussion with her younger sister. She told her how she convinced her with her emotional story. She said if she didn't go emotional, she is sure that her younger sister will not accept what she told her. She told my grandma that she is happy because she has finally agreed to come and live with her. My grandma asked her when she promised to come. My mom said she didn't tell her the exact day, but she promised to call her and inform her when she wants to come. My grandma was happy with my mom's younger sister's decision. She said she prays she doesn't change her decision. My mom told her that she thinks it's sealed from what she told her. She said she knows her younger sister very well. She doesn't hide her feelings. She said if it's something she wouldn't do, she would have told her immediately. She said since she said it herself that she will come, it's sealed. When my dad returned from work, my mom informed him about her discussion with her younger sister. She told him that her younger sister has agreed to live with them. She said her younger sister promised to call her soon to inform her about the exact day she will be coming. The news came as a relief for my dad. He picked his phone and called his friend who he told to help him look for a domestic worker. When his friend answered the call, he tried to explain to him the reason he hasn't gotten him a domestic worker. My dad said the reason he called him is to inform him that he doesn't need the services of a domestic worker anymore. At first, my dad's friend thought my dad was angry because he did not provide what my dad wanted as it when due. He told my dad to give him some time to help him look for a domestic worker. My dad told him that he isn't angry with him. He told him that my mom's younger sister has agreed to move in. He said that's why he doesn't need a domestic worker anymore. When my dad's friend heard that, he became relieved. He told my father that the option he opted for is better. 3 days after, my mom's younger sister called her. She called at exactly 8 p.m. when we were all having dinner. My mom left her phone in her room, so she didn't hear that her phone was ringing. It was until I stood up from my seat to pick something from my room that I heard the sound of her phone. I hurriedly opened her door and picked her phone. The call ended before I brought the phone to my mom. When I handed over the phone to my mom, she quickly checked her phone to see who called her. When she realized that the call came from her younger sister, she returned the call immediately. As soon as her younger sister answered the call, my mom apologized for missing her call. She told her that she left her phone in her room while she was eating in the dining. Her younger sister told her that she is fond of leaving her phone in her room while she is not there. She said it is one of the reasons why she usually misses important calls. My mom apologized again and told her sister that she will change. My mom's younger sister said she called to inform my mom that she will be coming on Sunday. She said she has some laundry to do on Saturday. She said after the laundry, she will start preparing. My mom was very happy with what she heard. My dad also smiled because he was hearing the conversation between my mom and her younger sister. My mom told her younger sister to take care of herself. She said she will be expecting her on Sunday. She appreciated her and ended the call. On Sunday morning, my mom's younger sister called my mom and told her that she was already on her way. As soon as my mom heard that, she rushed into the kitchen to prepare a delicious meal. 45 minutes after, my mom's younger sister arrived. She had to wait outside because our gate was locked. We usually lock our gate to prevent intruders from gaining access to our house. My mom's younger sister stood in front of our gate and called my mom again. She told her that she is already in front of the gate. My mom came to my door. She opened the door and woke me up. As soon as I woke, she told me to rush to the gate and open the gate for her younger sister. I was still trying to settle when Mom woke me, but when I heard that Mom's younger sister was waiting in front of our gate, I ran outside. I opened the gate for her. I collected her bag from her and I walked her into the sitting room. My mom came from the kitchen and hugged her sister. They hugged each other passionately because it has been a long time they saw each other. She hurriedly returned to the kitchen to check what she was cooking. 15 minutes after, my mom's food was ready. She sent me to my father's room to wake him up for breakfast. When I entered my dad's room, I told him what Mom told me to tell him. When I wanted to walk out of his room, he told me to stay. He said he heard a noise in the sitting room in his sleep. He asked me what caused the noise. I told him that it was Mom and her younger sister. He asked me when Mom's younger sister arrived. I told him that she arrived about 15 minutes ago. I said the noise he heard was when she arrived. After that, I left his room and joined Mom and her younger sister in the sitting room. 5 minutes after, Mom called us to the dining. A few seconds after we sat in the dining, Dad joined us. He greeted Mom's younger sister and he told her that he is happy to see her. He told her to make herself comfortable in the house. He said he hopes that she enjoys her stay in the house. We all ate Mom's delicious food before we all went to our rooms to take our baths and prepare for church. While we were about to leave for church, Mom showed her younger sister her room. She said she must have been tired from the journey she undertook in the morning, therefore, she should rest at home. She told her to put on the TV if she is bored. Dad told her that we won't stay long in the church because of her. He said if it wasn't because of the important program we have at church, everybody would have been at home today. We walked to Dad's car alongside Mom's younger sister. She helped us open the gate while we drove out. My mom told her to lock the gate. She said she should make sure her phone is close to her because when we return from church, she will call her to help us open the gate. 25 minutes after we left the house, we arrived at the church. Church service was already on, so we made our way to the back seat because all the front seats were occupied. We participated in church service until the service came to an end. After the church service, my dad and I waited for my mom in his car because she had to attend the executives meeting. After the executives meeting, Mom joined us in the car and we drove off. 25 minutes after, we arrived home. My mom called her sister's phone. As soon as she answered the call, she told her that we are at the gate. Mom's sister came to the gate and opened the gate. My dad drove in and she locked the gate. We were all walked into the sitting room while everybody took his or her place on the couch. My dad asked my mom's sister about her journey. She said her journey was fine. She said it wasn't stressful at all. She said as soon as she came out of the house, she got a taxi that brought her to our house. My dad wondered how a taxi was able to travel that far. He said taxis don't travel that far. My mom's younger sister told him that the taxi man is her longtime friend. She said he takes her to wherever she is going. My dad said he would like to have the contact of the taxi driver. He said there are some times that he doesn't live driving. He said sometimes he drives because he doesn't have a choice. He said if he has the taxi driver's cell phone number, he will call him whenever he doesn't feel like driving. My mom's younger sister picked her phone and searched for the taxi man's cell phone number. When she saw it, she dictated it to my dad. My dad called the taxi man immediately. He told him how he got his cell phone number. He told him the reason he collected his cell phone number. He told the taxi man to be on the lookout because he can call him at any time. The taxi man said he is available at any time. He said once he sees my dad's call, he would proceed to meet him where he is. My dad appreciated him for his kind gesture. He said he looked forward to working with him before ending the call. We continued the conversation until late in the evening. At exactly 8 p.m., we all moved to the sitting room to watch a popular series. The series finished at 9 p.m. and we all went into our rooms. The next morning, my mom's younger sister started her work in the house. She did all the laundry in the house before everyone woke up. When my dad woke up to prepare for work, he met her in the kitchen washing the dishes. My dad was surprised by what he saw. He asked her why she didn't wait until 7 or 8 a.m. before doing the house chores. My mom's younger sister said she likes doing her house chores very early in the morning before everybody wakes up so that she can move to other things that she needs to do. My dad appreciated her efforts. He said he wants to see more of that. He told her to help him open the gate. When she opened the gate, my dad drove off and she locked the gate. She walked back to the sitting room and sat on the couch. When my mom and I woke up, we met her sitting on the couch in the sitting room. My mom asked her why she was sitting in the sitting room instead of sleeping in her room. She said my mom knows that she doesn't sleep a lot. She said she woke up very early. She said she has done the laundry and washed the dishes. She said she was the one that opened the gate for her husband. My mom said she was surprised when she woke up and did not see her husband. She said he usually wakes her to help him open the gate when he is going to work. She said she was surprised when she woke up and realized that he has gone to work. My mom hugged her sister tightly. She appreciated her for standing by her during her trial period. On Thursday, my mom woke up feeling sick. She couldn't move her body. She had to be taken to the hospital by her sister. As soon as she got to the hospital, she called my dad and informed him. She told him that the doctor said my mom will be admitted for 3 days. When my dad left his office, he stopped at the hospital to check on my mom. He met her in a bad condition. She was very weak. She couldn't do anything. She was even finding it difficult to talk to my dad. At exactly 9 p.m., the nurses came into the room and told everyone to leave. They said my mom needs a lot of rest. They said visitors are only allowed to see the patients from 9 to 9 p.m. My dad and my mom's younger sister left the hospital. They drove home in my dad's car. As soon as I heard the horn of my dad's car, I ran outside to welcome him. I have been bored at home since I returned from school. I knew mom was taken to the hospital, but I didn't know she will spend 3 days there. When my dad opened his door, I saw only my mom's younger sister. I asked Dad about my mom. He said my mom is still at the hospital. He said the doctor has admitted my mom and she will spend at least 3 days at the hospital. As soon as I heard that, tears started flowing down my cheeks. I told my dad that I want to see my mom. My dad said he isn't going to work the next day. He said as soon as I return from school, he will take me to the hospital to see my mom. The next morning, I was reluctant to go to school. All I wanted was to see my mom. But I couldn't skip school because of my test. I left home at exactly 7:15 a.m. When I got to school, I was just hoping for school to close so that I can return home. At exactly 1 p.m., the school timekeeper rang the bell for the end of the day's activities. As soon as I heard the bell, I made my way to the school gate. As soon as I came out of the school gate, I saw a taxi. The taxi drove me home. I was surprised when I met the gate open. I walked in and I locked the gate. I walked into the sitting room but I didn't find anyone. I wondered why everywhere was silent. But my dad's car that I saw in the compound gave me the impression that my dad is still in the house. I went to his room and I didn't find anyone in the room. I decided to check my mom's younger sister's room to check if she was in her room. As I got close to the door, I started hearing my mom's younger sister moan. Her moan was so loud that you could tell that Dad was riding her very well. I stood in front of the door and I was hearing my dad and my mom's younger sister kissing and romancing themselves. It was obvious that they were enjoying what they were doing. I was only hearing them, but I couldn't see them. I went to the back of the room with the hope that I could see them from the window. Unfortunately, the window was tall. I looked for a table and placed it at the back of the window. As soon as I climbed the window, I was able to see them. I saw my dad and my mom's younger sister naked. My dad was on top of her. His mouth was on her mouth, kissing her. His left hand was on her left breast while his right hand was under. He was rubbing her boobs with his left hand while he was using his right all over her body. After romancing themselves for minutes, they finally had sex. When they were all exhausted, I came down from the table and took the table away from the window. I came back to the sitting room and sat as if I didn't see anything. After 30 minutes, my dad and my mom's younger sister came out of her room. They were shocked to see me in the sitting room. My dad asked me when I came back from school. I told him I came back not too long ago. I said I sat in the room because I didn't see anybody. My dad said he went to my mom's younger sister's room to help her fix her toilet. I looked at my father and shook my head. I never knew he could lie to me or betray my mom. He told me to take off my school uniform and join him in his car so that we can go to the hospital. I hurriedly went to my room and pulled off my school uniform. I joined my dad and my mom's younger sister in the car and we drove off. Hey, guys, please let me know if this is right or if this is what I should do, or please let me have your thoughts on this. Hi guys, my name is Anita and I am 17 years old. I am energetic and passionate about life. I hate to be on the losing side. I have experienced a lot of things that a girl my age shouldn't experience. I can't say that I lack the basic amenities of life. No. On the contrary, I have always had the things I wanted. Some of which were provided to me by my father, others, I was made to get myself by my mother. One could envy me from a distance, but when you come close to me and come into my world, you will discover that all the happiness, love, joy, and care were just an illusion, and my open world is not one you would desire. I had money but lacked the attention of my parents. Yes, our home was broken. I am the product of divorced parents, whose relationship was a mistake on the part of my dad and manipulation on the part of my mom. I stayed with my mom, who never really cared how I was doing except when she needed to use me for her games. My dad would trade anything just to be with me, but my mom kept me as leverage. Dad never knew the real me, and mom didn't care. I'm sure that if my dad knew what his ex-wife was turning his daughter into, he would fight tooth and nail just to make sure I was taken away from her. Mom had us relocating on a constant basis, and so, I never had a steady life. I never had regular friends. I was here today and gone tomorrow. My academic life was as good as dead. I was no better than a dropout. We had to change schools frequently too, and whatever we went, Mummy made me lie that my dad was dead. This was something I never told Dad. People seemed drawn to me out of compassion. The girl who lost her dad. There was a time when I usually found myself wishing that things were different. As a growing child, I would find myself wishing that I had parents who could see eye to eye. It was just too much for me. I am who I am today because of my mom. And I am not grateful to her. She exposed me to the realities of life faster earlier than necessary. I can clearly remember the first day I saw people having sex. It is a memory I guess I would live with for the resting my life. There is nothing that I wouldn't give to wipe it off my mind. I can vividly remember coming back home from school really tired, wishing I would just for once run into the loving arms of a mother, only to have my dreams broken. I got home that day and found the door locked. Ask went by the window. I saw what I hate to remember. There was my mom used by two men. I was horrified at my bones. I couldn't move. I just stood looking with tears pouring out of my eyes. After about 10 seconds, she turned her head, only to find her 12-year-old daughter crying. I ran away. I didn't know where I was running to. I just kept running. I didn't care where I was running to. I just wanted to run away from what I had just seen. I was broken. I was bitter. I didn't know when I finally ran back to school. I would rather stay in school than go home to such torments. I don't know how long my mom looked for me. I don't even know if she ever looked for me, but she came to pick me up after management called her. On our way home, she tried acting nice. I can't remember the excuses she made, but she somehow made me promise not to tell Dad about it when next we spoke. Although I promised to keep the secret, that night, I was broken. Until then, Mom had been like an angel in my eyes. Spotless, a sweet soul. How she could stoop so low to do such a thing was something I couldn't tell. I tried crying myself to sleep because the nightmare was happening with my eyes wide open. I prayed that it would just be a bad dream once I woke up. Very early the next morning, Mom actually started acting like nothing bizarre happened. She seemed like the mom I had known, but no matter how hard she tried, the wound was fresh, and it would take us a long time to heal. That ordeal was the first of many. Soon, she got tired of hiding her shaft deals from me that I got used to seeing various men at our place. Why Mom chose to live that kind of life, I could not tell. When I grew older, I understood why she tried her best to beat poverty. My mom was from a poor background. Her parents were extremely poor. It was so bad that they had nothing but hatred towards her when she was given birth. Her parents hated her for coming into the world. They cared less if she lived or died, and she was usually at the mercy of the good-hearted people of the community. She never knew what it meant to be loved. Although they shared the same house, everyone lived on their own. Her father lived for himself. Her mother lived for herself. Her sister lived for herself. Her half-brothers lived for themselves. Nobody cared for anybody. If anyone was sick, nobody cared. If anyone died, nobody cared. I learned that Mom once ran away from her home for 3 days, and nobody cared if she was alive or not. The hatred was too much in the family. It was really a dysfunctional family. The parents had resentments for the children, and the children reciprocated the same gesture. It was regular to find her father fighting with her half-brothers over money, or Mom was seen fighting her mom over something trivial matter. Her parents were often heard saying that their biggest regret in life was the failed abortion of all their kids. There was a time when my mom fought with her mother over a man. Her mother claimed that she was now going after her clients. Yes, Grandma slept with different men in the same bed she shared with Grandpa. The fight between Mom and Grandma was nothing new, but the comments made by Grandma fueled the hatred Mom had for her. Grandma told Mom that she would never amount to anything in life. Mom said to her that being nothing in life was better than ending up like her. However, she vowed to be better than her mom. The neighbors were constantly entertained by the family drama. Mom's family was everything terrible you could imagine. It was a jungle, and everyone lived like an animal. The school was not an option for the children because nobody was going to pay, so each child learned to fend for himself from an early stage. Mom was really smart. It seemed as though she was the smartest of all the children. She knew that sleeping with boys who were wallowing in poverty just like her would only turn out bad for her, so she decided to go for those who were better off than she was. She was going to go for the educated and wealthy. She soon started visiting bars and brothels where they were high and mighty patronized. Her game plan was to make a rich client develop emotional feelings towards her, and by so doing, she got him wrapped around her fingers. However, she soon discovered that nobody was willing to form a bond with a harlot, so she decided to take a different route. That was when she met my dad, Tony. Tony was from a wealthy family. He was from a good home. He had me raised with a high level of moral standard, and his parents had lots of expectations from him because he had been given a lot. He had a religious upbringing, and he was never allowed to do the kind of things other kids did. He didn't date girls, he didn't go for parties, he was just made to focus on his career, and he exceeded expectations. As a result of his parents' wealth and influence, he did very well. Tony was now a man, and due to his background, he hardly thought about marriage. He had zero thoughts about dating and getting married. He was into his work. This soon gave everyone around him, especially his parents, concern. They soon began advising him to get married. His company held a party to celebrate their achievements, and his colleagues persuaded him to lighten up and join them at a bar. It was while he was there that Mommy spotted her next big fish. She approached him while he was with his friends, and they happily excused themselves. Mom quickly knew that Tony was a newbie in places like that. He declined the glass of wine she offered him, and when he finally gave in to her request for a dance, Mom had to guide his steps on the dance floor. Soon after the party, Mom took him for an after-party, which led to her becoming pregnant. Dad was full of regret. What was he going to do? How would he tell his parents that he had gotten a girl pregnant outside wedlock? He was scared of aborting the child as he didn't want to put either mother or child in harm's way. His religion forbade abortions. He finally decided that it was best he just got married to her. He took her to his parents, and when they questioned her, she lied that her parents were dead and she had to fend for herself. The marriage took place before the pregnancy became obvious. After the childbirth, he learned he had made the worst mistake of his life. One which could ruin him. Mom resumed smoking immediately after I was born, and her thirst for alcohol couldn't be satisfied. She turned the home into a mess, and even though she would never lack since she was the wife of a millionaire, she was never really satisfied. She kept on going to parties, and while I was still months old. Dad couldn't understand why a mother would be this reckless. It was clear that she didn't know how to love. I guess that you can't give what you don't have. Dad finally decided to get a divorce from her when he caught her sleeping with one of his staff, and he discovered that her parents were still alive with 6 children. It was more than he could take. He cared less about the consequences. After her marriage to Dad, Mom traveled down to the community where her family was staying. Being a billionaire's wife, she went with her car and driver to spite her family. She needed to show her mother that she finally ended up very well. It was the talk of the town. She had changed her name from Rachel to Cindy. She spoke in an accent that was foreign to her community. She threw money in every direction except towards her family. The hatred was deep. Her family was not going to let her be. They traced her down to the city and made several claims about being her family, but she simply told her husband that they were just frustrated beggars who were out to take advantage of other people's success. Tony believed her. However, after so much pestering, Tony decided to give it some thought, and he paid an agent to investigate the issue. The findings were shocking. They were Mom's family. Dad traveled down to the community where they lived to see for himself. The people of the community gave him the history of his wife. Dad was shocked by the bones. Mom always had surprises for him, but now, he had had enough. He drove back to the city in anger, only to find one of his male staff sleeping with his wife. Now nothing would hold him back from getting a divorce. He told his parents, who were in full support of his actions, and the divorce proceedings commenced. Mom got a good fortune out of it, and she was awarded my custody. Something that Dad didn't want her to have. Dad was made to pay her a certain amount every month, which would include Carter for the needs of both mother and child, and he could see me twice every week. Mommy didn't seem to care. She had won either way. She would no longer have to dance around with poverty anymore, or so she thought. Within months, she had squandered the money gotten from the divorce, and we had to live on the monthly allowance. This allowance was never enough for Mom, and so she decided to play her game again and get another prey. This made us go from city to city. This made my claim to not have a father. It wasn't until I was 14 years old that my mother finally forced me to have sex. The men who usually visited the homes where we stayed would often make passing glances at me. They complimented my beauty and would whisper something into Mummy's ears, after which she would nod her head and say that I wasn't ready. When I turned 14, Mom made me follow a young man home. I guess he was twice my age. He was the son of one of her older male friends, and I later learned that the man wanted his son to get intimate with the lady because he heard him say that he was attracted to men. So, when this friend of Mom paid her a considerable amount, she called me and asked me to follow the boy home, and we should both enjoy ourselves. We got home, and I was amazed at the beauty of the house. I had only seen such places in the movies. The servants quickly arranged dinner for the both of us, and we ate in his room. It was clear that everything was new to him as they were to me because I could tell that he was more nervous than I was. We played a bit, and he kissed me. We soon found ourselves trying to make the night a success story for our parents, and we eventually did. When I was driven home the next day, I was really embarrassed by Mom took the opportunity to give me some lecture on sexuality. I watched her glow with pride as she said that I had been initiated into womanhood and that it was a phase every girl must pass through. She said it was a privilege to have had my first encounter with the rich man's son. I didn't even know his name, and I was sure that he didn't know mine. This was how I got introduced to life, and it didn't take long before I became a pro in the area of dating. My mom and I soon formed a partnership. She would have me put the best schools where the kids of the wealthy usually went. I was to identify them and get close to them. Through them, I would then give her access to their father. Mom had no issues making these men fall for her. She was beautiful. Far beautiful than myself. This was how Mom sustained the luxurious life she had so come to know. It was when we moved over to a new city and I was enrolled in a new school that I met Pete. Pete was a charming guy, but he was not really my type. He was naive in every sense of the word. I played the pity game and got the empathy of the class. Pete was moved by my story. He never knew that I was moved by his father's wealth. He was an excellent combination of intelligence and wealth. I soon had Pete solving problems for me, academic and financial difficulties. I had learned to be manipulative, just like Mom, so I had no issues making Pete think I was genuinely interested in him. Mom would always warn me not to lose focus or get attached to any guy because we were not going to stay at a place for long, so I had never had a serious relationship with anyone. I don't even remember a time in my life when I had feelings for a guy. I was just taking them for a ride. Pete soon invited me over to his house. He had wanted me to meet his dad. When I arrived, the dad was still busy and Pete and I just sat at the lounge talking. When he finally came to join us, I was overwhelmed by his presence. He had such charisma and confidence that every lady would want her man to possess. When I saw him, I almost doubted the fact that Pete was his son because he was way handsome. His light baritone voice carried with it such authority that made his servants loyal. When he came, Pete immediately introduced me to his father, Mr. Xavier. I was smitten. I watched his whole body as he talked. He was the complete package. He asked about me, and I talked about myself. I gave him the usual story that I had given everyone else about my dad being dead and my mother working hard to make ends meet. They all bought the story. Everything went perfectly that night. After dinner, Mr. Xavier asked that his driver drop me off. I wasn't pretty sure that I had impressed him that night because he seemed to pay little attention to me. However, I looked forward to coming over again, not seeing Pete, but seeing his dad. Mr. Xavier. However, although I was intrigued by him, I knew that the story concerning his escapades with ladies could be true because he never seemed interested in my mom when I spoke about her. Mr. Xavier was an oil magnate. He never remarried after the death of his first wife, who died during childbirth. He wasn't ready to settle down with any lady because he knew that they only came around because of his wealth. Losing the woman whom he had struggled with was really painful for him. His wife was everything to him. His success story would never have been written if not for her sacrifices. She was his motivation. She saw things in him which nobody ever saw. When he was starting up, things were not very smooth, but she stuck with him, and she gave him every support which he needed. He was really a mess, but she fixed him up. He was scared that she could leave him at any point in time because she had the opportunity to ditch him for more affluent guys, but she always reassured him of her undying commitment towards him. It was clear to Mr. Xavier that his lover was an angel sent to him from up above. He owed her his life. His life was now worth a lot simply because of the investment she made in him. He proposed to her as soon as he could afford a ring, and although she had no reason to say yes, she did. She was willing to risk her life for him. After they were wedded, she further intensified her efforts towards the growth of his company, and 5 years into the marriage, he was already a billionaire. That was when she became pregnant for Pete. Mr. Xavier was so happy when he got the news of her pregnancy. They were finally going to get an addition to their family. He made plans for them. He put things in place for the delivery. He actually got his wife a surprise house and a private jet just to say thank you. It was, however, a sad day for him when he was told that she didn't make it. He felt terrible. It was as though his world had just crumbled. He experienced a kind of pain that he had never known in all his life. He felt empty inside. His wife had just left a space that would be impossible to fill up by anyone else, and although he found consolation in the child which she left behind, he made a vow not to remarry. He knew that he would have a hard time finding a lady who wouldn't love him because of his money. A few months to his wife's demise, he began visiting clubhouses, and that was where he slept with a lady who claimed to be pregnant for him. He wasn't going to make the mistake of getting married to this harlot. That was a mistake a friend of his had made years back. He, however, took care of the lady who claimed to be carrying 2 children on the inside of her. He made sure she was comfortable and lacked nothing. He was willing to accept responsibility and take care of them all, but it was soon discovered that the lady had been lying all along. The pregnancy test was positive, and she did have twins, but they were not his. Although he didn't send her to jail for extortion, he quickly took back the car and house that he had given her. This further strengthened his resolve to be on the lookout for women. A week after I had met Pete's dad, I fell ill and missed school. This was our plan to get Pete to come to visit, and he did. When he arrived home, Mom quickly made him feel comfortable. She was good at that. Pete immediately fell in love with her personality. She was giving the love of a mother which he had never known or experienced. All through his stay, I was eagerly waiting to hear him say that his dad sent regards to me, but he didn't. While looking at him talk or laugh, I could only think about his dad. What was happening to me? Why was I falling for his dad? This was the first time in my life that I would really be interested in someone, and it just had to be my boyfriend's dad. Pete gets home feeling overwhelmed by the love shown by my mom. It told his dad all about her. She lit up a spark in him that his father had never seen since he was born. It wasn't surprising when Mr. Xavier invited Mom and me for dinner at his place. We knew that our plan was making progress. The day finally arrived when we were going to meet with Pete and his dad. I was eagerly looking forward to it because I wanted to see Mr. Xavier again. Mr. Xavier sent his driver to come and pick us up at about 7 p.m. We arrived at their home, and everything was well placed. We were led to the sitting while we patiently waited for our host to show up. I watched Mom feast her eyes on the eloquence of everything. Not even her billionaire ex-husband had such taste. I could read her thoughts from the look on her face. This was a big fish that would take a lifetime to consume. I knew that she was already playing a scene in her head where she would wake up in that house and boss the servants around. Before long, one of our hosts arrived. Pete. He was smiling and happy to have us around. I was sure he would have a nervous breakdown if he knew that he was expected but not wanted. I watched Mom put up a fake smile. It always baffled me how Mom could play different characters at once. How could she be good one time and bad the next? Mom was a wonder. While we were all seated and getting comfortable, I had the familiar voice that I was longing to hear. It was Mr. Xavier. His perfume filled the air. Our attention was immediately shifted from son to father. We all stood up to greet him, and he seemed impressed. He invited us to the dining table for dinner. Mom and I were blown away by the kind of service his staff rendered. Mom avoided every topic that would lead to her ex-husband, which we claimed was dead. She acted hurt by the painful memories of the past when Mr. Xavier asked about her husband. I don't know how she did it, but tears just flowed out. I almost believed that they were real. This woman never ceased to amaze me. Mr. Xavier felt bad that he had asked her about the past she was trying hard not to remember. He personally understood what it meant to lose someone you loved. He had had the same bitter experience. He apologized to Mom for making her uncomfortable, and Mom simply played the victim. We never wanted the night to come to an end, but it did. I was not particularly glad that Mr. Xavier and Mom spent most of the time together. That night was the beginning of another adventure for us. Mr. Xavier frequently began inviting us over to his place at weekends. He would sometimes persuade us to spend the night at his house. Mom had warned me not to get intimate so quickly with Pete so that I didn't appear like the cheap girl that I already am. She equally didn't give Mr. Xavier easy access. This made him all the more interested in her. She didn't seem like other women. She rejected his cash gifts and even turned down his offer to buy her a car. She didn't seem interested in his money at all. She always wanted things put in order, and I was amazed at her meaningful contributions to discussions centered on the oil and gas sector. I repeatedly asked myself how a lady who had never seen the four walls of a classroom had such knowledge. Her charm was finally catching up on Mr. Xavier, who saw more of his wife in her. The closer the holidays came, the closer Mom and Mr. Xavier became. I had no other option than to stick with Pete. I guess a bird at hand is worth more than 1,000 in the bush. When the holidays arrived, Mr. Xavier suggested that we go for a vacation somewhere in the Maldives. The Maldives is a living wonder. It was a sight to behold. We saw things we never knew existed. We visited places, went fishing, and partied. This was the kind of life that Mom desired, and we were living it. Everything was just perfect, even though I still wished Mom and I could trade places. I wished that she could settle with Pete while I would be left with his dad. It wasn't their first time coming there, though. Almost all the staff was well acquainted with Mr. Xavier and Pete. They looked at us as though there were others who had been in our position. Well, it didn't matter to either of us because we were occupying the position now, and we were not going to leave anytime soon. It was on our second day there, while Pete and I were taking a walk, that I discovered how deep he had fallen for me and how deep his dad had fallen for my mom. I listened with a grin on my face as he told me that he had never felt this way in his entire life. He confessed to me that this was the first time he was feeling complete. He said that this was the first time he actually knew the joy that came from a whole family. He then told me about his birthday that would be coming up in 2 weeks. It was going to be celebrated at home with most of his father's colleagues and friends present for the occasion. He said that all he desired for a birthday present was to move in with them permanently. I was glad that we had gotten this family, but I somehow felt bad because I knew that this chapter would soon come to go close, and they would be negatively affected once we left because they sincerely loved us. I then told him not to make decisions or wishes like that because his dad may not be in support of it. Although I knew that his dad wanted a relationship with my mom, I told Pete that his dad may just want to have both families as friends and nothing more. At that point, he told me what I never saw coming. Pete said that he has never been this way with any woman before. His dad always came alive when my mother was around. Pete said that he overheard Dad telling his friends that he had found a span just like his ex-wife and he was going to propose to her during my birthday celebration. This was it. We were almost there. I couldn't wait to tell Mom even though Pete told me not to. This was good news. When we got back home, I broke the news to Mom, and she was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a billionaire's wife once again. Life had finally given her a second chance, and she wasn't going to take it for granted. She wasn't going to let anyone, not even her family members, ruin this golden opportunity. She would never go back to her community to show off. Mr. Xavier told Mom about the birthday party and asked that we both be present. He had a popular designer design a dress for her, which was worth $10,000. Mom and I showed up that day. We actually came earlier than most guests. Mom pretended as though she never knew what was set to happen. She was an actress indeed. While my mom was going through the guest list, her reaction suddenly changed. She immediately had us sneak out of place. We picked a cab and drove home as fast as we could. Once we got home, she asked me to pack up my bags quickly because we were relocating. I was surprised. Why should we migrate to another city now that everything was beginning to fall in place? As we boarded a train, she told me that the third name on the list of guests was Mr. Tony. My name is Anna. I am 19 years of age. I was born in Washington. I started my life as a little girl in the city of Washington. My parents moved to Washington a few weeks after they got married. 2 years after they gave birth to me, I started primary education in Washington. After my primary school education, I was enrolled in another high school in Washington. When I graduated from high school, I got admission into a college in Texas. For the first time in my life, I had to live without my parents and live elsewhere. My dad got a good apartment for me because he didn't want me to stay in the school hostel. The apartment was nice. I fell in love with the apartment as soon as I entered. My dad stayed with me for a day before he traveled back to Washington. The next day was the day I was supposed to resume school. I woke up very early, I took my bath and I prepared for school. My dad got me a taxi driver that will be driving me to school and be taking me back home after lectures. As soon as I finished my preparation, I called the taxi driver. He called me immediately he arrived at my gate. I entered the taxi and we drove off to school. We arrived at school at exactly 7:50 a.m. The school was so big that I couldn't find my way to my faculty. While I was figuring out how to locate my faculty, I saw a young guy standing close to a tree. He was talking to someone on the phone, so I waited for him to end the call. As soon as he ended the call, I said hi. He replied and asked if he could help me. I told him that I am a new student. I said this is my first time in school. I said I am a law student, but I don't know where my faculty is. He welcomed me to the school. He said I will enjoy my stay at the school. He said I should follow him because he is also going to the faculty of law. I was very that help was in sight. After all the things I went through, I finally saw someone willing to help. We walked for 2 minutes and he showed me the 2 years with a good result, he or she will graduate with a good grade. He said having a good grade is a big advantage in the labor market because every organization wants a good and competent worker. After advising us, he went back to the subject matter. He told those that have an interest in becoming the class representative to step forward. 2 female students and 3 female students went forward. The lecturer said it is now in our hands to decide who our class representative will be. He said because we are all meeting ourselves for the first time, he will give the 5 students the chance to sell themselves to the class. They mounted the podium one after the other to sell themselves to the class. After 45 minutes, they were through with their manifesto. The lecturer mounted the podium again. He said the next thing is to appoint our class representative through voting. He said the student that has the highest vote will become the class representative. We were 100 in the class, 95 of us were left to cast the vote. The lecturer told every student to tear a sheet of paper and write the name of their favorite candidate on it. He said after writing it, every student should step forward and drop it in the ballot box. The lecturer told the contestants to mention their names to the class. They did that, he told the other 4 students to return to their seats while John should remain standing. The lecturer told John that if he wants to be a successful class representative, he has to take everybody in the class along in everything he does. He said if a lecturer gives the class assignment, he has to make sure that everybody in the class gets the assignment. He said if he wants to submit an assignment too, he has to make sure that at least the majority of the class has submitted. He said the welfare of the class is part of his duties. He said if he does not see any student in class, he has to call that student to know why he or she is absent. He said one of the ways he can achieve that is to create a WhatsApp group for the class. After the lecturer finished his speech, he told John to return to his seat and the lecturer left our class. When the lecturer left the class, some of John's friends went to him and congratulated him again. They took him to the restaurant to celebrate his victory. When I realized that there was nothing left for me to do, I called my taxi driver to take me home. He told me to wait for him in front of the school gate so that he wouldn't bother entering the school gate. I boarded one of the taxis on the campus and I alighted at the school gate. 5 minutes later, my taxi driver arrived. I entered his car and he drove off. I got home around 3 p.m. As soon as I entered the house, I went straight to the bathroom and took a shower. After taking a shower, I ate the food I bought on my way home. After eating, I lied down on my couch and slept off. I woke up around 8 p.m. When I woke up, I walked into my room and continued my sleep. I woke up very early the next day because I didn't want to get to class late. I called my taxi driver before I entered the bathroom to take my bath. I knew he will arrive before I finish my preparation for class. 20 minutes after, my taxi driver called me and informed me that he is in front of my gate. I was still putting on my cloth when he called. I told him that I will join him in a few minutes. 5 minutes after, I joined my taxi driver in his car and we drove to school. I entered my class at exactly 7:50 a.m. Our first lecture was to begin at 8 a.m., so we had little time to gist. John walked to the front of the class and addressed the class for the first time since he was elected as the class representative. He thanked us all for voting for him and he promised to work diligently for the success of all the students in the class. He said he will make sure every information is passed as it when due. He said his first task as a class representative is to create a class group. He passed a blank paper around the class. He said everyone should write his or her cell phone number on the paper so that they can be added to the group. At exactly 8 a.m., a lecturer entered our class, so we suspended what we were doing. When the lecturer ended his class, another lecturer came in. We had lectures until we went for a break. After the break, there was no lecture, so we continued writing our numbers. John created a group that night and he started giving us information on the group. He would tell us whenever we have a lecture or whenever a lecture is cancelled. One day, I received a message from an unknown number on WhatsApp. The message I received was, "Hey pretty, how are you?" I didn't reply because the number looked strange. While I was browsing the internet, the number called me via WhatsApp again. I was reading important content on my phone, so I didn't answer the call. When I finished reading what I was reading, I replied to the message with the hope that it was someone I know. After replying that I was fine, I asked the person who he is and how he got my number. He asked me which of the questions do I want him to answer first. I said he should answer anyone first. He said his name is Nelly. I said I don't know anybody with that name. He said I might probably not know him, but he knows me. I asked him where he knew me. He said we are in the same class. I asked him how he got my number. He said he picked my number on the class group. As soon as I heard that, I became very angry. I threatened to report him to the class representative for taking my number on the group without informing me. When he heard that I was going to report him, he started begging me. He said I shouldn't report him. He promised that he won't do that again. I told him that if I see his message on my phone again, I will report him for intruding on my privacy. He apologized once again and promised not to intrude on my privacy again. The next day in school, I saw the lecturer that was in class on the first day I went to school. I was the one that greeted him because he didn't recognize me. He responded to my greeting, but he was still looking at me like he knew me from somewhere. I told him that I was the student that came late to the class on the first day of resumption. I said I was waiting outside when he called me into the class and asked me why I was standing outside. When I finished my explanation, he remembered who I was. He said he hasn't come to our class since that day because he traveled. He asked me how I have been coping with my study. I told him that I have been coping very well. While I was about to walk away, he held my hand. It was a shocker to me. I was surprised and at the same time, I was afraid. He asked me whether I have a cell phone and I replied in the affirmative. He gave me his phone and told me to type my save my number on his phone. I collected his phone and did as he instructed. I walked away from him and I returned to my class. We had only one lecture after that. As soon as the lecture ended, I called my taxi driver to come and take me home. When he arrived, I entered the car and he drove me home. I was very hungry when I got home. I rushed into the kitchen to prepare a meal for myself. While I was preparing the meal, I quickly entered the bathroom and took a shower. 30 minutes later, my food was ready. I ate my food in the sitting room. After eating, I lied on my couch like I used to. At exactly 9 p.m., I went into my room and slept off. It was my lecturer's call that woke me the next morning. I was surprised to see his call very early in the morning. I didn't want to answer the phone at first, but I thought within myself that he might have an important message for me. When I answered the phone, I respectably greeted him. He noticed that my voice was not as audible as it used to. He asked me if I was still sleeping. I told him that it was his call that woke me up from my sleep. He apologized for disturbing my sleep. I said he doesn't need to apologize because his call came at the right time. I said if he didn't call, I would have been late for class because I will still be sleeping by now. He said if I come to school, I should make sure that I see him in his office before I leave. I told him that I would do that. As soon as the call ended, I started thinking within myself that why will a lecturer want to see me in his office? I concluded within myself that he might have important information for me. When I finished preparing for school, I called my taxi driver. He arrived in a few minutes and he drove me off to school. I got to school around 7:45 a.m. I knew I had 15 minutes before the commencement of the lecture, so I went straight to Dr. Peter's office. I met his door open, but he wasn't in his office. I called his cell phone number to inform him that I am in front of his office. But he didn't answer his call. When I didn't see him, I had no other option than to go to class. 5 minutes later, Dr. Peter returned my call. He asked me where I am. I told him that I was in front of his office when I called him. He said he was in a meeting with his colleagues, which was the reason he wasn't able to answer my call. I told him that I have left his office and I am presently in class. He said he will be in his office by 9 p.m. He said from 9 p.m. I can come and see him in his office. At exactly 8 a.m., a lecturer entered our class. He taught us until 10 a.m. As soon as he left, another lecturer entered the class. We had lectures until 2 p.m. As soon as L left the class, I went straight to the school's restaurant because I was very hungry. After eating to my satisfaction, I called Dr. Peter. When he answered the phone, he asked me where I was. I told him that I am at the school restaurant. He said I can come and see him in his office now. I left the school restaurant and walked to Dr. Peter's office. When I got to the door of his office, I knocked. He already knew I was the one, therefore, he didn't hesitate to tell me to enter. When I entered his office, he told me to sit on his couch. I was surprised to see a very big couch in his office. I sat on the couch thinking why this man invited me to his office. He excused himself and went out of his office. He returned 5 minutes later with a bottle of wine. I told him that he didn't need to disturb himself because I just left the school restaurant. He said it's not compulsory I drink the wine in his office, he said I can take it home. He placed the wine in front of me and sat very close to me. He didn't say anything for some seconds, so I started wondering why he told me to come in the first place. I looked at his face and I asked him the reason he asked me to see him in his office. Dr. Peter said since he became a lecturer, he has had nothing to do with his students. He said he tries to avoid his students. He said my case seems different. He said he began to like me from the first day he saw me. He said he knows what he is about to tell me might sound weird, but it is from the bottom of his mind. Dr. Peter said he likes me and he wants me to be his girlfriend. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh when he said it. It was annoying to me because I knew he will have a wife at home. I asked him whether he has a wife at home. He said he has a wife and 2 kids. I said why he will want to date a young girl like me when he has a wife at home. He said I shouldn't bother about his wife. He said his wife wouldn't know about our relationship. I stood up angrily and walked out of his office. I didn't even bother to call my taxi driver that day because of the anger in me. I used public transport to get to my house. When I got home, I took a shower to relax. After taking the shower, I cooked a delicious meal for myself. While I was in the sitting room watching television, Dr. Peter's call came in. I thought within me whether to answer the phone or not. Before I could decide, the call ended. A few seconds later, he called again. I answered at this time with an angry tone. Immediately I answered the call. I asked him why he was calling me. He said he wanted to let me know that what I did was very wrong. He said even if I do not want to date him, I shouldn't have walked out on him. He said at least he is old enough to be my father. I told him that if he knows he is old enough to be my father, why he would want to date someone as young as his daughter. He became very angry and started ranting on phone. He said he would let me know that he is my lecturer. He said I will suffer a lot to pass his course. He said he has a lot of friends in the department. He said he will do everything to frustrate my stay in school. He said he has come across many stubborn students like me during his career and he has dealt with them severely. He said my case won't be any different. I ended the call in anger. Throughout that night, I was very angry. The next day, I went to school very angry. I got to school at exactly 7:50 a.m. At exactly 8 a.m., Dr. Peter entered our class. He taught us for 2 hours before he left our class. As soon as he left the class, I walked out of the class and sat under a chair that was under a tree. While I was sitting, a young guy in his mid-20s approached me. He greeted me and I responded. He noticed that there was an element of anger in me. He asked what could make a young and beautiful girl like me angry at that time of the day. I told him that I am fine. He said his name is Nelly. I said I do not know anybody with such a name. He said I will remember him if I think very well. I told him that I don't know anybody with such a name. He said he was the guy that sent me a message on WhatsApp some days ago. He said he came to apologize for what he did. I told him that he shouldn't have bothered because I have forgotten about it. Nelly and I began to talk that day and we bonded very well. We talked until the school closed. After the school closed, we went to our respective homes. When I got home, I was the first to send Nelly a message on WhatsApp. I told him to forget about what happened the previous day. I said he can chat and call me anytime he wants. Henry was so happy. He said he wanted to know why I was angry back in school. I told him that his anger was caused by one of our lecturers. He asked me who the lecturer is. I said it is Dr. Peter. I told Nelly that Dr. Peter called me one morning that I should see him in his office. I said I didn't know what I wanted to do for him, but I went. I said when I got there, he told me something irritating. Nelly asked what he told me. I said he told me that he wants to date me. I said when he mentioned it, I walked out on him. I said when I got home, he called me and threatened that he will make sure I fail his course. Nelly asked what I did after that. I said I didn't do anything. I said I have made up my mind to read very well for the upcoming examination. I said I want to see whether he will fail me if I write what he taught me in class. I told Nelly that I was already feeling sleepy. I said we will meet in school the next day. The next day in school, Nelly came to me and told me that he wants to tell me something. He said he doesn't know if I will accept it or not. I said he should say what he wants to say. He said he will like to stay in my place so that we can read together for the upcoming exam. I said that's a good idea. I said reading together will help me a lot. I left school around 1 p.m. that day because we weren't doing anything. None of our lecturers came to class because we have already concluded the topics for the semester. We were all waiting for our examination. 1 week before the exam, Nelly came to my house and we started staying together. We drafted a timetable for our reading. We had 8 courses in total, so we divided them into 2. We will read a course in the morning and another in the afternoon. We were reading one day when I mistakenly saw Nelly's anaconda through his boxer. Nelly's anaconda was very hard. I knew Nelly was thinking about having sex with me. I wanted him to know that I saw his anaconda, so I asked him why his anaconda was so hard. He said he doesn't know. He said it happens to him sometimes. I smiled knowing that he was lying. I moved close to him and I held his anaconda. As soon as I held his anaconda, he dipped his hands in my boobs too. I was caressing his anaconda and he was caressing my boobs. The pleasure was out of this world. After caressing me for minutes, I walked him to my room and we had sex. After the sex that day, we continued to have sex until the day of the exam. On the day of the commencement of our exam, we had early morning sex before we left for school. The exam came and I did my best. I was expecting a very good result because I read very well for the exam. 2 weeks after the exam, the result was out. We received a message from the school that we should check our results on our portal. I was afraid to check. I called Nellie that he should help me check it. Nellie said I should give him 5 minutes. 10 minutes later, Nellie called me. I was afraid to pick the call. When I eventually picked the call, Nellie read my results to me. It was a fantastic result. I did very well in all my courses including Dr. Peters' course. My result was the best in my class. 2 weeks later, we resumed for the second semester. People began to notice me in class. I began to have a lot of friends because everybody wanted me to share my knowledge with them. 4 years later I graduated from college as the best graduating student in my school. The convocation ceremony was attended by many people. My parents invited a lot of their friends to my convocation. They wanted them to come and see how their daughter made them proud. After the convocation, I left Texas and returned to Washington with my parents. I stayed with my parents for 3 months before I got a job in a reputable company in California. When I got the job, I left Washington and relocated to California. I resumed at the office the next Monday after I traveled to Washington. When I resumed, my first stop was at the office of the chief executive officer of the company. She welcomed me. She told me what the company wants from me and she told me to make them proud. When I left the chief executive officer's office, I was taken to the office of the manager. The manager told me almost exactly what the CEO told me. From the manager's office, I was taken to the office of my direct boss. My direct boss briefed me on a lot of things. He told me my job description, the do's and don'ts of the organization, and the level of performance that is expected of me. After the entire introduction, I was taken to my office. The manager brought 2 ladies to my office.
He said they are my assistants.
He said I should call on any of them if I need anything. Days went by and I continued my job in the company. I made sure that I do all that is expected of me without delay. I noticed that my boss started having an interest in me. I was happy because he is a handsome and caring guy. Most of the time, he takes me on a lunch break.
He buys other things for me aside from food.
I was enjoying his company, waiting patiently for him to say what I wanted to hear. One day, I wore a very sexy dress to the office. The dress was so sexy that my boss had to compliment it twice. My boss used to compliment my dress often, but it was just too much that day. When he kept complimenting me, I knew he was up to something. I was sitting in my office when I saw his call. I hurriedly answered thinking he has something important for me. He told me to come to his office. When I got to his office, I stood for 3 minutes and my boss did not say anything. After some time, he walked close to me. Once again, he talked about my dress. He asked me if he can kiss me. I said he can. He said he doesn't want an ordinary kiss. He said what he wants is a French kiss. I said I haven't heard of that before and I do not know what it means and how to do it. He said I shouldn't worry, that he will teach me. He said he wants to explain it to me before we start. He said a French kiss is a kiss in which one or both partners use their tongues to stimulate each other's mouths for mutual sexual pleasure. My boss taught me French kiss and we did it. It was an exciting time with my boss. I kept asking for more and my boss was always ready to give me. Hey, guys, please let me know if this is right or if this is what I should do, or please let me have your thoughts on this.
This story takes us to a 16-year-old girl. Sweet 16, they say. But they don't know that life can be cruel even at that time. What can happen to a 16-year-old to think that life is cruel? Let me introduce myself. I am Anita. I come from the city that never sleeps, New York. Just like New York, I never sleep too. New York can be very inspirational, especially at night. You can't miss the lights. I live in the 10th floor of our apartment, and the views are just crazy. I always nap after school during the day so that I can enjoy the warm nights that New York brings. My favorite part of the day is sitting on my balcony, just like I am right now. I either am writing, watching a TV show, or sometimes I get lost in my own thoughts. My go-to TV show right now is definitely Game of Thrones. Everyone has a guilty pleasure. For me are TV shows and movies. I don't have a specific favorite genre. It simply has to have a beautiful, inspirational message behind it. My favorite part of our apartment is definitely our balcony. I spend the most time there. I eat there. You can learn a lot about the city on your balcony. You see a lot of stuff that happens. A lot of cool people just walking around. I witnessed a lot of breakups between random couples, drunk people passing on the streets. And it's kind of entertaining. Since I spent a lot of my time on the balcony, I almost know every one of my neighbors' stories. You might think that I spy or something, but I don't. I just can't help but stare. I have a lot of vases of flowers that I take care of it. It's kind of becoming my hobby too. I even got some lemons that I can't wait to grow and eat. On my balcony, I am never alone. I have my sweet little one, my cat Bella. I am a dog person kind of type. But dogs are hard to keep inside. Our Bella has been so easy to live with. She is white and fluffy. She is sweet and caring and the best cuddle partner that I could ever ask for. I've had Bella for 3 years. It was a birthday present from my parents. Bella loves to stare out of our balcony too. She has a curious soul. Just like me. Sometimes I feel like we are the same soul but in different bodies. It's like she understands what I say. I hope she doesn't feel lonely. We have thought about getting another kitty, so she can have some company. But we haven't decided yet. Besides my cat Bella, I live, of course, with my 2 beautiful parents. I am their only child, and they always got me feeling special. They feel sorry that they never had the chance to give me a sister. But they could have other children. However, even though sometimes it's hard, I never complain in front of them. My mother's name is Emma, and she is a veterinary. I love visiting her at work and just petting all those beautiful animals. My mother is very gentle and kind, and the animals love her. It's like the animal notices a good soul and feels comfortable. My father, Jim, on the other hand, is a lawyer. His job is more stressful, and I barely understand some of it. There are nights that he comes late at night because he is at his office working. My parents live in 2 different worlds, but still, they get each other so well. I aspire to have a love like theirs. It breaks my heart to think that someday they will get old and that I won't have them forever. We, as a family, try our best to spend time together. We love Sundays. My parents don't work on Sunday, so we always go somewhere and spend time together. Besides my life at home, I also have a life outside of it. I go to school. I am a sophomore. I have one very close friend who happens to be my neighbor. Her name is Sarah. She makes high school easier. We go to school together, and we come back together. She is like a sister to me. Like everyone, I don't like school. But I try my best to study and do good in school. There are a lot of parties that my school organizes. There are times that Sarah and I go there. My parents don't mind, they trust me. I can't lie and say that I never tried alcohol because I did. However, I have never been 100% drunk. I am not the type of person that gets attached to things. Just because I might enjoy drinking at a party doesn't mean that I will continue to drink every day. I know when to drink and when not to. There are times when I buy a pack of cigarettes just because of curiosity. I enjoy smoking sometimes, but I know that I will never smoke it in the future. I have control of myself. When you go to these parties, a lot of stuff can happen if you are not very careful. A lot of my friends that go to my school do drugs. This scares me. Smoking and drinking don't make you cool. But I think that's how some of my friends think. Even though those parties might not be the best idea. I met someone special 1 year ago. I met a boy named Abel. We have been dating for a year now. We met at a party, then we found out that we were going to the same school. Abel is 1 year older than me. We know that we are young and that maybe we won't last. At least that is what they say. But I know that we love each other. Abel is straight out of a movie. He is the funniest person that I've ever met. He is my first kiss. And I want him to be my first everything. He is the reason why I haven't cut my hair for a year. He just loves it. We would go to the cinema and kiss for hours. My parents found out about Abel months ago, so they know that we are together. They respect my choices, and they believe in us. Even my parents were so young once they started dating. So I guess we are all right. Another good thing about New York is that you can wear whatever you want, and none would say a word. It's the city where you can show off your fashion and not be afraid of it. However, even at 16-year-old, life can be cruel and unpredictable. It had been months since I haven't felt like myself. I felt deep inside of me that something wasn't all right. I started not wanting to go out and meet with my loved ones, Sarah and Abel. I didn't have energy for anything, and I just wanted to be left alone. I wasn't eating, and I couldn't even finish an episode of my favorite TV show. This was all of a sudden. I don't know why it happened. Even my cat Bella started to notice it. She would come up at my legs and just stare at my eyes like she asked me if I was okay. But I wasn't. I was meeting up with Abel, but I couldn't even speak. Later, I got informed that Abel had spoken to my parents about this. They all thought that I was going through a depressive phase, but I knew that I wasn't that type of person. However, I decided to meet up with a psychologist since my parents told me to. Clearly, this wasn't helping me since I couldn't even get up from my bed. My parents weren't home most of the time, and I couldn't even go to school. I was home alone, so Abel used to sleep over at my apartment. One night we fell asleep on the balcony talking about our future. We talked about having sex, and we agreed that we would go for it the next time we meet with each other. We were going strong for a year, so why not? On a Sunday night, my mother came up to me and noticed that my head was burning from the temperature. We rushed to the hospital, and that's where the real sad story begins. I don't remember the ride to the hospital, but I remember waking up to a hospital bed. My mother had told me that the doctors made some tests. She said that the tests would arrive the next day and that today I had to sleep here. But I had other plans on my mind. Today, I should have been meeting up with Abel. It should have been our special night. But life works in mysterious ways, I guess. I've had the best sleep since I could remember that night. The next day I woke up to Abel texting me. He didn't know where I was. Last night he went to a party. He thought that I would meet him there. I couldn't help but think about who he was and who he met there. However, I texted and let him know that I was at the hospital. My mother and father seemed so worried that I couldn't understand why. The minute that the tests came, Abel knocked on the door and went in. He was standing near me, and I could hear the smell of the alcohol. He had been drinking yesterday, and I was just feeling jealous of what he could have been doing. The doctor was telling me the results of the tests, but I couldn't understand what was wrong. I looked at my mother's eyes, and I saw some tears. Then all of a sudden, I heard the word cancer. My parents started crying, but Abel and I were just shocked. The doctors said that it would be for the better if we started chemotherapy tomorrow. Chemotherapy, tomorrow, how could my life change in a second? I just wanted to get home, to my movies and to my cat. That night I barely slept. The next day came so fast. Abel wasn't here. He had to go to school. I already felt like we weren't so close. My doctors said that the chemo treatment would last between 3 to 6 months. But I was ready. I just wanted to get over it. I took the first dose of the first day. Can't say that I loved it. My parents took some weeks off of work and were staying there with me. Then, bad news after bad news. So, basically, if you're doing chemo, there is a chance that you're gonna lose weight and hair. Months went by, and things just got worse. My cancer was not getting better, and I was still taking the chemo treatment. I couldn't spend time with Abel or Sarah, and I missed falling asleep with Bella. Abel would come after school, but nothing was feeling the same anymore. I miss everything about my life. I am writing this on my hospital bed, wishing I was on my balcony. The doctor said that it's good if I start and take walks around the city. One day, I decided to do so. As I was getting ready, I noticed how bad I looked. I couldn't even notice myself anymore. I was so skinny, and half of my hair fell down. I was wearing a hat, but it was summer. I decided to go with my mother only. She thought that it would be a good idea if we called Abel. But I don't want Abel to see me this way. I went out and saw what I was missing out on. The sun was out, the world was full of colors. You should have seen the girls on their sundresses out for lunch. I felt like my soul had gotten older. That's when I decided that I shouldn't be your problem. Abel. I knew that I had to set Abel free. I know that he does not love me anymore. I wasn't the same person. I didn't look the same. He always used to say that he loved my hair. Now what? I didn't have any hair left. He should continue to live his life. He's young. I texted him so we could meet and say our goodbyes. That was the last time that Anita had written. She had actually passed that day. The cancer had covered her whole body. Her body's ashes are going to be on her favorite place, her balcony, so her soul can still watch over the beautiful sky of the city that never sleeps.
My Mom and I. Please, real story animated. Make my story animated. Hi, I'm Tiffany, and I'm almost 17, and I'm fun to be with, like adventures, and in my melancholic nature, I love taking risks. But I don't tolerate it when I'm underrated or intimidated. I love my parents, honestly. The open secret remains that their incompatibility is nothing good to write home about. And that's what kills my joy most times. Dad has always complained about Mom's infidelity in their marriage. The last straw that broke the camel's back was on one fateful day I was right in my room while I believed that Mom had already gone to bed. And for all we know, Dad was gone for a business trip in Australia, and we expected his arrival in 2 days' time. Suddenly, I began to hear a manly voice in Mom's room. Could Dad have come back by this time? Oh no! I called Dad's line, and his autoresponder responded that he was in a meeting. That means Dad isn't in town. Then who is this man that I'm hearing his voice in Mom's room? Then, in my suspense mood, I drew nearer to Mom's door to hear this voice better, and lo, it was the black bug guy I normally see Mom drop off whenever she came to pick me up from school. Oh, really? I guess she decided to bring this big guy, Mr. Frank, home tonight, because the dad isn't at home. To wrap her in his arms, imagining eternity. As he felt the smoothness of her skin, his mind fantasized as their bodies interlocked in the sea of emotions, creating much energy and passion, heating up deep down their souls. The response was too real for Mom to believe this is happening to him. I can see that from Mom's body language. She softly said to him, "Frankie, come and be lost within me forever. I feel myself being a part of you from the onset. That I dragged you into the car has been all about Frank inside my mind, and the seconds fleet into minutes, minutes ticking into hours, and the hours clicking into eternity. Are the two lovebirds. With the look of things, Mom seems to feel very much safe and cared for with Mr. Frank. Then I began to understand what the bone of contention may be in my parents' soured relationship. Mom really needed a man to care for her and treat her like a queen she is, and not business conference today, business meeting tomorrow. That fateful Saturday morning, I was woken up by the shouts and voices of grievances and anger. And I heard my dad's voice very clear, roaring like a lion, just as usual whenever he is scolding at Mom. I was getting confused more this time. Did I mistake Dad for Mr. Frank? Just as usual, I crept out of my room. This time, Mom's room was not locked. It was wide open. No, it can't be. I have never seen Mom and Dad in such atmosphere of emotions and bond before. When I came close to her room, I saw him. It was Dad. I greeted both, and of course, I didn't expect them to respond to my greetings anyway. They continued in exchanging words. Then I knew there is a fire on the mountain because Dad came back with an early morning flight. He said on getting to Australia, the meeting was held in a jiffy, and he had to make his way back to the state. Then I heard Mom screaming, "Go, go, go!" I'm tired and fed up with all these. It's over between us. That was how Mom and Dad got separated. Then, according to the law, I live with my mom till date believing that someday a miracle will happen and both of them will come together again. However, I love my parents. I just needed more. More care, more attention, more love, and more togetherness. Sincerely, when I see other kids together with their parents go on vacations, shopping, sports, and all that, I feel jealous. During my 16th birthday, I wished I could get all I wanted in my parents. The atmosphere was smiling at me as I blow out the candlesticks, standing in front of a gigantic cake with my both parents standing beside me. One on the left and one on the right, and then they both handed over something wrapped in a gift bag. What could it be? I thought aloud. Wow, it's a phone! I mean, 2 different lovely phones. What a birthday! Then the music was rolled, and I danced and danced in my Cinderella pink gown. Unfortunately, it was a dream. How I wish this is not a mere dream, but a reality. But I believe in dreams becoming reality. I believe it will come to pass one day. Oh yes, it is my birthday. How I wish it would be celebrated in a grand style. It is funny because when I turned 16, my mom promised to buy me a phone. I kept reminding her about that until one day a strange event that I couldn't understand. Something happened after turning me around a couple of times, and for my 16th birthday, my dad wanted to buy me a phone, but my mom never wanted to see me with him or allow him to do anything for me. Note that my mom is this type of independent woman. She insisted that she wants to buy it for me, and I was happy because finally I'm going to have my own phone. On my birthday, Mom did not throw any party around for me. All I got was an early morning pat on my back and whispering, "Happy birthday, my little angel. I promise I'm going to get your phone today." Wow! That sounds interesting, and trust me, I kept reminding her that day. "Mom, my phone!" On that day, I waited till evening. The waiting was too long. My mom keeps saying a bit later, but suddenly she asked me to dress up, of which I did, although she was acting as someone who was waiting for somebody until finally she got the call from a colleague which she was waiting for, and we head to shopping. I enjoy driving with Mom, so we went in her car. We passed the store where we should stop and buy the phone. "Mom, that's the shop," I said in excitement. Rather, she apologized that she needed to visit her colleague at the castle. As a child, there are things I don't debate with Mom. We arrive at the colleague's house, and it was a big house. I loved it. He had 3 cars and 2 dogs. Mom knows that I like dogs, so she said to me, "Tiffany, you play with the dogs, and I will get back pretty quick." "Yes, Mom," I responded. I started playing with Japs and Jade. As I was engrossed in the fun, after some time another man with a big black car entered the house, and then comes another one, and after 5 minutes, another one. I was wondering what is going on. My mom came to meet this colleague, and here are 3 more visitors in there, and I'm not seeing my mom coming out. So I decided to go inside, and upon approach, no one was in the living room. It was silence except the weird noise coming from far away, and it sounded like someone is clapping. One door was opened in one of the rooms, but all of the rooms were dark or less lighted, and I came closer and called Mom. No one answered, and then I came even closer, and the clapping sound started increasing. Clap, 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 and sometimes even faster, clap, clap, clap. And then I heard someone saying, "Yeah," and again, clap, clap, clap. And then I heard the voice of Mom saying, "Yeah, yeah, ah, you are good." Then she increased the speed of the exclamation. "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah! Oh, thank you, yeah, yeah, and finally, yes! Let's do it," I thought. This is a fight, or what's going on? At this moment, I called loudly, "Mom, are you okay?" Everything stopped, and they all get out saying, "Yes, let's do it. Congratulations." But then I asked Mom, what was that clapping noise? And all that she said was, I pitched them an idea for a startup business, and yes, they agreed to fund the project. But then one thing that got me thinking was the physical appearance of the 3 men. They were sweating profusely, looking like men that just engaged on a physical combat, sapped of all their energy with this post-ejaculation, their minds numbed down, tired, and walking slowly, gulping down some drink. Immediately we went to the store, but while we were going, I asked her what were those weird noises, and she said it was nothing serious. They were all excited. And yes, I know she was excited because when she got out from that room, she was a bit reddish in her face somehow, and her voice was cracky, because she really shouted so much. My mom also told me not to discuss what happened with anyone for any reason. I knew she was warning me about this because of my dad. He calls me every 2 days to know what's happening around Mom, and she also told me that this need to be kept secret forever. Forever? Why is she holding this event so tight? For me, I see no big deal in it. Oh, but I will adhere to her instructions. With my sense of curiosity, I also asked her, why are all her colleagues men? There is no other female amongst them except you. She responded that they couldn't make it that day, but would come in the next meeting. I'm glad that finally my mom is happy, and she's going to make her dream come true. And I've got a new phone. But what was weird is that my mom never started that business, and now we are almost 1 year from there. This also means that my phone is 1 year old, too. But I hope she will buy me a new one when I turn 17 next week. What do you guys think? What should I do so my mom will buy me a new phone? Please, like this video if you think it was not a business consultation. And leave a comment if you think it was something else going on.
How Anita did the unthinkable even while she was still in love with her fiancé. Cheating is as old as humans. Some partners take it lightly while others go the extra mile to pay their cheating partners. This story talks about how two partners who loved themselves from the beginning eventually became strangers. The fiancé was doing his own thing while the fiancée was also doing her own thing. They were living under the same roof but they had a different ideology. Sit back, relax and enjoy this story. I met Chris when I traveled to London for holiday. It was the norm in my family then to always go on holiday towards the end of every year. In 2017, my dad decided that we should travel to London because my mom and I have not been to London before. Our holiday to London coincided with the time the London Derby was about to be played. We arrived in London on Thursday and the London Derby was to be played on Sunday. The City of London was very lively in anticipation of the London Derby between Chelsea Football Club and Arsenal Football Club. I asked my dad if that is how the streets of London are every time the London Derby was around the corner. My dad said there are many teams in London like Chelsea Football Club, Arsenal Football Club, Tottenham Football Club, and West Ham Football Club. He said these teams are all in the first tier of English football, which means they play each other regularly. He said there are other London teams in the second tier of English football too. He said none of the London derbies comes close to Arsenal versus Chelsea. He said the street will still witness more activities on Saturday and Sunday. The background of the teams that I heard from my dad made me fall in love with the city and the teams. I told my dad to book a ticket for all of us to watch the London Derby. I said I didn't want to miss any of the actions in the stadium because if the city is as lively as we saw, then the stadium will be more than what we were witnessing on the streets of London. My dad promised to book the ticket for the whole family when we settle in our hotel. We lodged into the Prime Hotel. My dad paid for 7 days because our holiday was supposed to last for 7 days. As soon as we settled down, I reminded my dad about the tickets. My dad asked me why I was eager to watch the match because he doesn't know me as a lover of football. I told him I wasn't much interested in the football itself, I am more interested in what will happen at the stadium. As soon as my dad booked the ticket, I went to my room while I left him and my mom in their room. I was very tired because of the long journey from the United States to London. While I lied on my bed, I could still hear the noise of the fans outside the hotel. I watched them through my window before I finally retired to my bed. I woke up the next day intending to tour the whole city. I went to my dad's room and I told him that he has to take me to major places around the City of London. My dad agreed to take me around the City of London. He said we should take our breakfast first. He said after taking our breakfast, we can rest a little bit before going out. I went back to my room to take my bath. After taking my bath, I joined my mom and dad in their room where we had breakfast. After breakfast, my dad called a taxi that would take us around the City of London. My dad bargained with the taxi man and he agreed to drive us for the whole day at the rate of $300. Emirates Stadium, which is the venue of the London Derby, was the first place we visited. We were taken through various buildings in the stadium. We were taken to the dressing room of the players, the training pitch, the volleyball pitch, and the trophy cabinet. We left the Emirates Stadium and moved to Stamford Bridge, which is the stadium of Chelsea Football Club. We were taken through the stadium's building including the training pitch, the volleyball pitch, the track and field stadium, and the trophy cabinet. Fortunately, the Chelsea Football Club players were having their final training session before the London Derby. So we stood there and watched them. After the training, we took pictures with some of the players and the coach. We left the Stamford Bridge Stadium and moved to the Tower of London. The Tower of London is one of the world's most famous buildings. We went through all the rooms in the building. From the Tower of London, we moved to the Emirate Airline cable car. The Emirate Airline cable car provides a stunning view of the city departing every 30 seconds from the Greenwich Peninsula and the Royal Docks. From the Emirate Airline cable, we moved to the London Transport Museum. The London Transport Museum hosts an exhibition connecting transport with the social and cultural history of London. We saw more than 80 vehicles spanning 200 years of London's history, including a Red Route Master bus and the world's first underground steam train. We ended our tour at the Warner Bros. Studio. At the Warner Bros. Studio, we saw first-hand sets, costumes, and props used in the Harry Potter films. We were taken into some of the film locations including the Great Hall, Dumbledore's office, and Hagrid's hut. After taking a tour of the Warner Bros. Studio, we entered into our taxi and headed back to our hotel. We arrived at our hotel at exactly 9:15 p.m. My dad paid the taxi driver and we went into our hotel room. Days passed by and we continued to enjoy our stay in London. On Saturday, which was a day before the showdown, Chelsea Football Club supporters and Arsenal Football Club supporters held a rally at different points in London. Chelsea supporters held their rally in front of Stamford Bridge while Arsenal fans held their own in front of Emirates Stadium. We joined Chelsea's rally because our hotel was closer to Stamford Bridge than Emirates Stadium. The D-Day arrived. The match was scheduled to hold at 2 p.m. but my dad told me that we have to prepare to leave the hotel by 10 or 11 a.m. because of the crowd that will be in front of the stadium. As soon as I heard that from my dad, I rushed to my room to take my bath while my dad entered his bathroom too. My mom went to the kitchen to prepare a light breakfast. By the time my dad and I finished taking our bath, breakfast was ready. My mom had already eaten her breakfast. She left breakfast on the table while she went to the bathroom to take her bath. By the time my mom finished taking her bath, my dad and I had finished eating breakfast. While we were taking our breakfast, my dad had already called the taxi driver that took us on tour. The taxi driver arrived at 10:25. He called my dad that he was already in front of our hotel. We left our room and joined him. On our way to the stadium, we met different people with different costumes on the road. Arsenal fans had red costumes while Chelsea fans had blue costumes. We arrived at the Emirates Stadium at exactly 11:15 a.m. A journey that was not more than 20 minutes became 45 minutes because of the number of people on the road. When we arrived at the Emirates Stadium, we joined a queue of more than 200 people. The attendants were checking everybody's ticket with a computer because they wanted to prevent forgery. After about an hour and 30 minutes, it got to our turn. My dad presented his ticket, my mom's ticket, and my ticket to the attendant for checking. It took the attendant more than 10 minutes to confirm our ticket. We gained access to the stadium at exactly 1 p.m. When we entered the stadium, we began another round of searches. Because of the population of fans in the stadium, it was difficult to find a seat. 10 minutes into our search, we finally got a seat close to a man. But we had a problem because the seats we got were 2 and we were 3. I raised my head a little bit and I saw a seat close to a guy. My mom and dad sat on the 2 seats while I went to the vacant seat that was close to the guy. The atmosphere in the stadium was electrifying. I was enjoying every bit of it. The atmosphere of the stadium is what I wanted to see and I was enjoying it. At exactly 3 p.m., the players came out for the warm-up. They were received by huge applause from fans of both teams. While I was shouting and cheering both teams, I noticed that the guy that was sitting close to me was looking at me. Every time our eyes met, he would look another way as if he was not looking at me. I was just smiling because I understood him perfectly. At exactly 3:20 a.m., the players returned to the dressing to fully prepare for the match. When the players walked back into the dressing room, the atmosphere of the stadium became a little bit relaxed. The noise from both fans went down a little bit. The guy that was sitting close to me felt that was the opportunity he needed to have a conversation with me. He finally summoned the courage to talk to me. He looked at me and said he has been enjoying how I have been cheering both teams. He asked me which of the teams that am I a fan of. I told him that I am not a fan of any of the team. He looked very surprised when he heard that. I told him that I am not even a football lover. I told him I had just come to the city with my family to have some fun. I told him that it was the mood of the city that drove me to the stadium. I told him how everywhere in the city was in a carnival mod when I arrived in London. I said it was the mood of the city that made me ask my dad what was happening, and he told me that was how the city usually comes to life when it's time for the London Derby. You could see the surprise on his face when I was talking. He asked for my name and I told him that my name is Anita. He told me that his name is Joseph. He asked me where I came from and I told him that I came all the from the United States with my family to have fun. Joseph smiled when I told him that I came from the United States. I saw the smile on his face which prompted me to ask why he was smiling. He said he is also from the United States. I asked him which state is he from and he said he lives in Alabama. I smiled also. I told him my family and I live in Georgia. I told him my family and I visit Alabama frequently because we have a family friend there. Joseph asked me when I will be returning to the United States. I told him that our holiday is supposed to last for 7 days and we have spent 4 days already. I said it means we will be going back to the United States in the next 3 days. Joseph said he came to London for a project and the project will last for 14 days. He said he will be returning to the United States after the completion of the project. While Joseph and I were having a conversation, the players began to walk onto the pitch. At that point, Joseph and I could not hear each other because the stadium has erupted. The noise was too much for us to hear ourselves. Joseph told me that we should enjoy the football because once the match begins, the noise will be louder than what we are hearing. 5 minutes after the players walked onto the pitch, the match began. Chelsea Football Club had the better possession in the 5 minutes. They looked threatening in front of the goal, but the Arsenal defense was resolute. 20 minutes into the match, Chelsea Football Club took the lead through Eden Hazard. The Chelsea Supporters Club took over the pitch. You could hear their noise loudly even though Arsenal Football Club was the home team. 45 minutes after, the referee blew the whistle for the end of the first half. While the players were walking down the tunnel, a lot of spectators also left their seats to get some refreshment. Joseph and I continued our conversation because the noise reduced drastically. Joseph sarcastically told me that we have only 15 minutes to talk because the players will back on the pitch after 15 minutes. Joseph said what we can talk about in 15 minutes. I told him that we cannot have any meaningful discussion in 15 minutes. He asked me for my cell phone number and I gave him to him. He asked me if we could see before I travel back to the United States. I told him I do not think it will be possible because, after the match, my parent and I will head back to our hotel. I said we can only be talking on the phone. I said if he returns to the United States after his project, we will have time to talk to each other. 15 minutes after the players left the pitch, they returned to the pitch for the second half. 12 minutes into the second half, Arsenal Football Club equalized through Theo Walcott. The home fans got their voice back. 84 minutes into the match, Arsenal got the winning through Theo Walcott again. The home fans were in a jubilant mood. The away stand became silent as they started sensing defeat. At exactly 95 minutes, the referee blew the whistle for the end of the match. Arsenal Football Club players and coaches came to the fans to celebrate with them. While the celebration was going on, Joseph told me he was leaving. He said he has something important to attend to. My father also decided that we have had enough fun. He said we should return to our hotel to rest. He said the taxi driver was already waiting for us outside. Exiting the stadium was not easy because of the crowd. After about 10 minutes of finding our way, we were able to exit the stadium and join our taxi. Getting to our hotel was also not easy because there were a lot of cars on the road. After about 1.5 hours on the road, we arrived at our hotel. We were all tired, so we all went into our rooms. The next morning we were in our rooms throughout the day. We didn't go out like we used to. We spent the rest of our holidays most in our hotel room. A day before our departure day, I did some laundry with my mom. We packed our entire luggage and prepared for our departure the next day. My dad woke me up at exactly 5 a.m. on Sunday because he didn't want us to miss our flight. We all took our baths and headed to the airport in our usual taxi. We got to Georgia at exactly 2 p.m. By 3 p.m., we were in our house. When we got home, Joseph was the first person I called. I told him that we just landed in the United States. Joseph was very happy for me. He said he will also be in the United States in a few days. He said he can't wait to meet me when he lands in the United States. I graduated from high school a few weeks before we traveled to London. I have been at home ever since I graduated because the admission into college was not out. I approached my father that night and I told him I want to learn how to play volleyball. I told him rather than sitting at home doing nothing, engaging myself in volleyball will be better. My father accepted and he told me that he will take me to a volleyball center for registration the next day. My father woke me very early the next day because he wanted to take me to the volleyball center on his way to work. I took my bath very quickly and I joined him in the car. We got to the volleyball center around 7 a.m. We met a lot of volleyball players who came for training. We were directed to the office of the management for official registration. After registration, I was given all the kits I need for training. I joined other ladies on the pitchy while my dad drove to his office. The training ended at 11 a.m. After the training, the coach addressed all players. He introduced me to all of them. He said he wants me to put a lot of effort into becoming a fantastic volleyball player. After the address, I left the center and headed home. As soon as I got home, I took my bath and I went straight into the kitchen because I was very hungry. Every morning, I joined my father in his car to the center. The population of players kept increasing every day, which gave room for competition. A few weeks into my training, I started getting a lot of recognition. After training on Friday, we were told that we have a volleyball match against Titan Queens on Sunday. The coach said we should all listen to the names of that have been selected for the match. When the coach mentioned my name, I was very happy. When I got home, I told my mom that she has to come and watch. I called my dad on phone and I told him too. They all agreed to come and watch me play volleyball. I was the first person to wake up on Sunday. We were told to come for early morning training before the match. I went to my parents' door to inform them of my movement. I told them that the match was slated for 11 a.m., therefore, they should wait till 10:30 a.m. before leaving the house. I waved them goodbye and I left. When I got to the center, the coach and some players were already there. We did our training before we headed to the team hotel to rest. At exactly 10 a.m., we left the team hotel and returned to the center. The opposing team arrived around that time too, so we had a familiarity walk with them. At exactly 10:45, we went back into the dressing room to change into our jerseys. 5 minutes after, we were told to walk onto the pitch by the referee. As I was walking onto the court, I saw my mom and my dad in the stand. We won the match by a wide margin. I played the best game of my life. At the end of the match, I was voted for as the best player. My parents were very happy with my performance. I took pictures with them, my coach, my teammates, and the players from the opposing team. On our way home, my dad could not contain his joy. He said he was happy with how proud I made him. He said I should take my volleyball training seriously. He said I should not hesitate to come to him if I need anything that will enhance my volleyball training. When we got home, my dad told my mom to prepare a very delicious meal for dinner. He said he wants her to prepare a meal that we will all enjoy. He ordered expensive wines from the local mall near us. Our house was in a carnival mood that day. We ate to our satisfaction. We took some of the food to our neighbors. I went to bed that night feeling like a queen. Not even my graduation from high school got me this emotional. I called Joseph and informed him of how I made everybody in my home proud today. Joseph was very happy too. He said he will be in the United States the next Sunday. He said what I did calls for celebration and we will celebrate it together. 7 days after, Joseph was back in the United States. I was the first person he called when he arrived. He told me how stressful his journey was and how tiring his project was. After talking about his trip and his project, Joseph said he will like us to meet on Tuesday. He said he would have chosen Monday, but he needs a lot of rest. I obliged his request. Around 7 p.m. on Monday, I called Joseph to ask him where we were going to meet and the time we are to meet. He said we should meet at his house by noon. I had the intention of skipping my volleyball practice before I called him, but his response changed my mind. If we were to meet by noon, then I can go to my volleyball training before going to see him. I woke up at exactly 6 a.m. on Tuesday. I joined my father in his car. He dropped me at my training center while he drove to work. Normally, our training usually ends by 11 a.m., but I told my coach that I have an important thing to attend to. Therefore, I have to live by 10 a.m. I left training at 10:00 a.m. and I got home by 10:30 a.m. I took my bath and I came to the kitchen to eat my breakfast. After taking my breakfast, I called Joseph and I told him I was on my way. I left the house at 11 a.m. I was fortunate to get a taxi in front of our house. The taxi dropped me in front of Joseph's house around 11:50 a.m. When the taxi dropped me, I called Joseph and I told him to come and pick me in front of his house. A few seconds later, Joseph came out and we both entered his house. Joseph's apartment was very nice. He had the latest electronics in his house. I told him that I like what I saw. I said that is how a house should be. Joseph was just smiling at me. He asked me what he should offer me. I told him that I ate before I left my house, because I didn't want him to have a feeling that I don't want to take anything in his house. I told him to give me a bottle of wine. He went to the fridge and brought the bottle of wine. He dropped the wine in front of me and sat close to me on the couch. I was wondering why he sat very close to me. Joseph said he has not been himself since the first day he saw me at the Emirates Stadium. He said since then, he has been thinking of sitting close to me again like he is doing presently. Joseph said he loves me and he wants to spend the rest of his life with me. He didn't give me a chance to talk. Before I could say anything, Joseph's hands were already in my cloth and his lips were on my lips. He was kissing me with his lips while he was using his hand to caress every part of my body. He was touching me where I wanted to be touched. I kept moaning as his hands were going through all my body. When he noticed that I could not take him anymore, he carried me to his bed and we continued from where we stopped. We had great sex which lasted for more than 2 hours. After the sex, both of us entered the bathroom to freshen up. After taking my bath, I entered the kitchen to cook what we were going to eat because we were all hungry. In 30 minutes, the food was ready. We ate together. The kissing continued while we were eating, but I told Joseph that we cannot have sex again that day. I left Joseph's house at around 5 p.m. I got home feeling excited because it has been a long time since I had sex. The last time I had sex was when I was in high school. The sex I had then cannot be compared to what Joseph gave me. It was the best sex I have ever had. Days went by and our relationship became stronger. We began to do a lot of things together. I go to his house regularly and he comes to our house regularly too. Everybody in the neighborhood began to see us together frequently. Those we were hiding our relationship for when we started now know that something is happening between the both of us. 6 months into our relationship, Joseph invited me to the cinema. He said he wants me to watch the new movie released by Van Damme. When we got to the cinema, we met a lot of people who came to watch the movie. The movie was making waves, so everybody was trooping to the cinema to watch the movie. When we finally got our ticket, I was about to enter the hall when Joseph held my hand tightly. The next thing I saw was that Joseph was on the ground with his 2 knees. I was still wondering what Joseph was trying to do until I saw a ring in his hand. Joseph proposed to me in front of the crowd. I was speechless because everybody in the cinema was looking at us. I became shy and I didn't know what to say. I summoned the courage to say yes to his proposal. After the proposal, we went into the hall to watch the movie. After watching the movie, I rushed home to show my mom the ring Joseph gave me. My mom could not believe it. She was so happy for me. She prayed for me and encouraged me to do the right things. 1 month after Joseph proposed to me, I thought it was right for me to move to his apartment and start staying with him since we will be getting married soon. I told my parents about it and they agreed. I called Joseph and told him about it and he agreed too. Since everybody was in support of what I wanted to do, I felt it was right for me to do it. I finally moved into Joseph's apartment and we started living like couples. We did almost everything together. The love we had for each other became stronger than it was before. A few weeks after I moved in with Joseph, I started noticing strange behaviors from him. He started doing things that he did not used to do before. He started coming home late. Sometimes he won't even come home at all. He started ignoring my calls when he is at work and he doesn't eat when he gets home. One day, he came back from work looking very tired. I confronted him with all the questions I have wanted to ask him. He listened to all my questions but he didn't give any tangible answer. After that, he told me he is going on an official trip to Spain. He said he will be there for 2 weeks. At that point, I knew that Joseph has started seeing someone else. I started blaming myself for moving in with him. I thought we could have been better if we weren't staying together. If I had stayed back, I wouldn't know if he is cheating or not. At least, my mind will be at rest. On the day of the official trip he claimed he was going, I overheard him talking to a lady on the phone. I didn't hear what he told her but I knew he was talking to a lady. At that point, I decided to take revenge. I had a neighbor who has been eyeing me since I came to the house. He always compliments my dressing. Anytime we meet, he does not forget to tell me how beautiful I am. From the way he talks to me when we meet, I knew that he loves me. I was determined to take revenge on what Joseph was doing to me. On the day he was traveling, I followed him to the airport and made sure he boarded his flight before I left the airport. When I returned home, I went straight to my neighbor's room. I told him that my husband has traveled, so I need someone I could talk to. I said I didn't want to stay in the room alone because it was boring. He went to his fridge and brought me a drink. He was about to return to where he was sitting when I draw him back. I didn't allow him to say anything. I started kissing him roughly. You could see it was what he was craving for with the way he was moaning. He walked me to his bed and we continued until we were all exhausted. Hey, guys, please let me know if this is right or if this is what I should do or please let me have your thoughts on this.
Why Sophia must take a very difficult decision. My name is Sophia. I am 16 years of age. I was born in Miami and I lived there with my parents. I attended St. Margaret School. After graduating from St. Margaret, I moved to St. Paul High School. When I joined St. Paul High School, a lot of boys approached me. They wanted to date me but I was not interested in any of them. I became the topic of discussion among the boys in the school. Everybody was giving me different names. Some said I am boastful, while others said I have pride. Others that I did not know said a lot of unpleasant things about me. I was different among all the girls in the school because most girls in the school had a boyfriend in the school. I saw it as something that wasn't acceptable, so I did not engage in it. Days went by and I continued to keep my stand. I knew the best thing was for me to stay outside any relationship in the school even though I needed someone I could confide in then. A few days before the examination, I heard that everybody in my class planned not to sit close to me in the exam. They said they wanted to use that to send a message to me that if I do not their wish, I would suffer in school. I was laughing as Mary was telling me. She said she told me because she loved my personality and she thinks what I am doing is the best. What I heard from my junior Mary prompted me to read harder than I was doing before. I started reading at night because I wanted to be well prepared for the exam. I had another motivation to do well in my exam. My dad promised to take me to a cinema to watch a movie if I perform very well in my exam. I haven't watched a movie in a cinema before, so I thought this was the perfect opportunity to do so. When I got to school on Monday, the head teacher came to the assembly ground and told us that our exam will commence the next Monday. He urged all of us to read very well for the exam. He said at the end of the exam, the best student will be rewarded with the new iPhone 12. When I heard the announcement from the head teacher, I became more motivated than ever. I was using an Android phone then and it was not even a big phone. There were a lot of things that I was not able to do on my phone. My dad decided not to buy another one for me until I graduate from high school. After the announcement, the head teacher told us to go to our classes. As I was walking to my class, I could not take the thought of owning an iPhone 12 off my head. It sounded like the biggest motivation. 2 hours to the end of the school activities, Mr. John came to our class to inform us that he has prepared our timetable. He took his whiteboard marker and started writing. I took one of my notes and I wrote the exam timetable. I was happy with the timetable because 2 of my favorite subjects were slated for the first day. I loved mathematics and English language a lot. Therefore, when I saw that they were my first paper, I became happy and more willing for the exam to start. At exactly 2 p.m., the timekeeper rang the bell for the close of the day. I picked my bag and I rushed home because I was very hungry. When I got home, my mom had already prepared lunch. She told me to take off my school uniform and take a shower before eating. I wanted to eat first before doing any other thing, but I know my mom would not allow me to eat if I do not do what she says. I dropped my bag in my room and I took off my uniform. I entered my bathroom and I took a shower. I changed into another dress before coming out of my room. I rushed to the dining where my food was. I ate the food hurriedly because I was very hungry. When I finished eating, I sat on the couch to relax my brain because I was very tired. My mom sat close to me and she was asking me what happened in school. I told my mom what the head teacher said on the assembly. I asked her if she would allow me to use the iPhone if I win the award for being the overall best student in the school. My mom said I have come of age, so she cannot stop me from using an iPhone if I am awarded as the overall best student in my school. I was very happy, but I needed to confirm with my dad too. I sat patiently on the couch waiting for my dad to return from his office. When my dad returned from his office, I waited for him to take a shower and his lunch. I know it was his tradition to always watch CNN News before going to bed, so I waited on the couch. A few minutes later, my dad came to the sitting room and sat close to me. As soon as he sat, I told him what our head teacher said in school. My dad said it's a welcome development. He said he likes what the school is doing to motivate its students. I told him that the question I have for him is that I want to know if he would allow me to use the iPhone 12 if I am awarded as the best student. My dad said he has no other option than to allow me to use it because if I win, it will be a product of my hard work. I smiled, I appreciated him, and I went straight to my room. As soon as I entered my room, I opened my bag and I brought out my mathematics and English notebook. I read from the first topic to the last topic that night. I did not sleep until 3:30 a.m. As early as 6:30 a.m., I was awake getting prepared for school. Even though what I was getting myself into was difficult, the packages that will follow if I eventually become the best student were worth it. When I woke up, I did my daily routine, which was to pray, brush my teeth, take my bath, put on my school uniform, and eat my breakfast. After eating my breakfast, I went straight into my dad's car. I opened the door and I sat down while I wait for my dad to join me in the car. After about 5 minutes, my dad entered the car and we drove off. My dad dropped me off at the school gate and he drove off while I made my way into the school. When I entered, students were on the assembly, so I joined them. I was surprised to see the head teacher on the assembly ground. He said the reason he was on the assembly ground was to motivate us to do well in our upcoming exam. He said students that do well will receive valuable gifts from the school. He said students that fail will repeat their classes. After the announcement, the head teacher told us to go to our classes. For more than 2 hours, no teacher came to the class because it was revision week. Most of the teachers have completed their revision, therefore they do not need to come to class. 45 minutes before the break, Miss Williams came to our class. She was the only teacher that hasn't held a revision class with us. When she entered our class, she told all of us to bring out our notebooks. We started revising from the first topic and we ended our revision with the last topic. She urged us to read very well for her exam because it would not come easy. She said the questions she gave us are standard and technical questions that require a lot of reasoning. She left our class when the bell for the break was rung. As soon as I heard the bell, I went straight to the school canteen because I was very hungry. I ate to my satisfaction before returning to class. 2 hours after returning to class, the bell for closing time was rung. I picked my bag and I headed home. When I got home, I did my usual traditions, which were to bathe, eat, rest on the couch and wait for the next day. I did all these till Friday. When I got to home on Friday, I locked myself in my room. I read as if my life depended on the exam. I didn't come out of my room until Sunday when we were going to church. When we got to church, I was just praying for the church service to end so that I can return home. 5 hours later, the church service ended and we headed back home. When we got home, we were all hungry, so I joined Mom in the kitchen while my dad sat on the couch. After 45 minutes, the food was ready. We all went to the dining to eat. As soon as I finished eating, I went back into my room while my mom and dad sat on the couch. I read throughout the night. I read my notebooks from the first page to the last page. At exactly 4 a.m., I lied down on my bed to rest my brain. Deep into my sleep, I heard a knock on my door. I knew it was either my mom or my dad. I asked who was at the door. My mom replied. She told me to get up and start preparing for school. She said if I do not get up, I won't be able to follow my dad because he will soon be on his way to work. I jumped up from my bed and rushed into the bathroom because I didn't want to miss the trip with my dad. I usually find it difficult getting to school using a public bus. At exactly 7 a.m., my mom came back to my door and knocked. This time around, I opened the door immediately. I heard the knock because I was already set. When I opened the door, my mom told me that I should rush down to my dad's car because he was already in the car waiting for me. I didn't wait for her to complete her sentence before I started running to the car. As soon as I entered the car, my dad drove off. We arrived at St. Paul High School at exactly 7:30 a.m. My dad dropped me in front of the school gate like he always does and drove off. I didn't have the opportunity to drop my bag in my class because students were already coming out to the assembly ground after they heard the bell. I dropped my bag with the security men while I moved to the assembly ground. After the morning assembly routine, the head teacher came to address us. He told us the exam was starting that morning and he expects that we should have been prepared. He warned all students to stay away from exam malpractice. He said any student that is caught engaging in exam malpractice will face the school's disciplinary committee. He said facing the school disciplinary committee might lead to outright expulsion. He also warned all students to desist from taking anything to the exam hall that can implicate them. He said all students should check their pockets before going to the exam hall. He said the school management would not tolerate any excuse from any student if he or she is caught with incriminating materials in the exam hall. He also said another thing that is banned from the exam hall is a cell phone. He said any student that is caught with a cell phone in the exam hall will face prosecution. He said it is an act that the school frowns at, so every student should try their possible best to desist from any form of examination malpractice. He showed us a photograph he brought to the assembly ground. The photograph had the picture of students that were expelled from St. Paul School due to examination malpractice. After the head teacher finished his speech, he told us to walk our classes and wait for our teachers. When I got to my class, I opened my notebook and started revising what I read at home. After about 30 minutes, Mr. John came to our class with exam questions. He said all students should move to the exam hall. He told us to leave our books and bags in the class. He said we are only allowed to enter the exam hall with our pens. I opened my bag and I took my pen. I left my bag on my seat and I made my way to the examination hall. We are asked to form a queue in front of the exam hall. Mr. Patrick stood in front of the exam hall and was calling our names one after the other. When he calls the name of any student, he will check the student's identity card and the student's examination clearance before he allows the student to enter the hall. He did that for all students before we were all allowed to settle down for the exam. As soon as he noticed that we were all seated, he started distributing the exam questions. After distributing the exam questions, he took his whiteboard marker and wrote the starting and stopping times on the whiteboard. After writing the start and stop time, he told us to start. He went around the exam hall to check if there was any student that brought any incriminating material while the head teacher was monitoring the exam through the CCTV camera in his office. The exam started at exactly 9 a.m. Therefore, at exactly 11 a.m., we were asked to submit our papers. As soon as I submitted it, I rushed back to my class to revise before we will be called for the next examination. 30 minutes after, we were told to return to the examination hall for the next subject. The same procedure that was carried out for the first exam was carried out for the second exam. We queued and presented our identity card and examination clearance before we were allowed into the examination hall. The second examination began at exactly 11:30 a.m. The examiner gave us 2 hours. When I collected the question pair, I smiled because everything I have been reading throughout the previous week came out in the exam, just as Mr. Patrick did in the first paper. He took his whiteboard marker and wrote the start and stop time as soon as he gave us the examination paper. He told us that everyone will submit at exactly 1:30 a.m. irrespective of whether the person has finished solving the questions or not. He said those that are through before the slated time are allowed to submit. I started solving the questions from the first to the fifth. The exam had 7 questions, but the instruction of the examiner was that we should answer 5 questions. By 12:45 p.m., I was through with all my questions. I took my time to go through the answers one after the other to avoid any mistakes that might arise when the examiner is marking my script. The thought of iPhone 12 and a visit to the cinema would not want me to fail. I checked all questions and my answers and I saw that they were perfect. At exactly 1:15 p.m., I stood up from my seat and submitted my examination paper. As soon as I gave Mr. Patrick my answer booklet, he told me to go outside. I went back to my classroom waiting for other students to submit their papers so that we can be told to go home. At exactly 1:15 p.m., Mr. Patrick told all students to submit. He collected the entire answer booklet. When he came out, he told us to go home and prepare for the next exam on Tuesday. I was already holding my bag in my hand, so I didn't have to go back to the class. I immediately made my way to the school gate. Fortunately, I saw a taxi when I came out of the school gate. The taxi dropped me in front of our house. I gave him his money and I entered our house. Just as I usually do when I come back from school, I went into my room and took my shower. I changed into another outfit and I went to the kitchen to have my lunch. While I was eating, my mom asked me how the examination went. I told her my reading paid off because I saw everything I read in the exam. She was very happy. She told me not to relent. She told me to put more effort so that I can become the best student in my school. After my lunch, I sat on the couch to relax my head. My books were already on my table in my room. I put my alarm at 5 p.m. and I slept off on the couch. At exactly 5 p.m., the alarm started ringing. As soon as I heard the alarm, I woke up and I went into my room. I opened it and started reading for the next exam. I read until 1 a.m. before I retired to my bed. I woke up as early as exactly 6 a.m. and I went to the bathroom to take my bath. After taking my bath, I put on my uniform and I came to the sitting room to wait for my dad. When my dad came to the sitting room, he was surprised to me in the room already dressed. We all took breakfast and we went into his car. At exactly 7 a.m., we arrived at my school. My dad dropped me off and he went on his way while I made my way to my class. At exactly 7:30 a.m., we were called to the assembly ground. The head teacher reminded us of all the rules and regulations involving the examination. He told us to continue working harder to achieve a good result. He told us to go straight to the exam hall because the examination will start immediately after the assembly. When he left the assembly ground, we rushed to our classes to drop our bags because we will not be allowed to enter the exam hall with our bags. After dropping my bag, I rushed down to the exam hall. There was no time to revise, but I was confident that I had prepared enough. We queued in front of the exam hall as usual. We are only allowed into the exam hall after Mr. John checked for examination clearance. We started the examination by 8 a.m. and ended at 10 p.m. We were given an hour to prepare for our next examination. I went to my class, picked my bag, and went to a silent place to read because many students were making noise in my class. I was there when I heard that the bell has been rung for the exam. I went to my class to drop my bag and I joined my colleagues in the exam hall. We started the exam at exactly 11 a.m. and it ended at 1 a.m. After Mr. John collected our examination booklet, he told us to go home. I rushed back home to prepare for the next day's examination. That was my routine throughout the examination period. It lasted for 14 days. On the final day of the exam, the head teacher applauded all students. He said we have all done well, but only one student can be awarded the prize of the best student. He told us to go home. He gave us the date when the prize for the best student will be awarded. He said all students must come with their parents on the prize-giving day. On the prize-giving day, I woke up very early and took my bath. I went to my parents' room to wake them up. My parents were very surprised to see me at their door at that time. I told them to get prepared so that we can start going to my school. I was confident that I would be awarded the best student because I read very well during the exam, and I was able to answer all the questions that came my way in the exam. I left my parents' room and went back to my room to put on my clothes because I had already taken my bath. After putting on my cloth, I came to the sitting room to wait for my parents. At exactly 7:30 a.m., my parents came out of their room already dressed. My mom prepared a light breakfast for us. After eating breakfast, we all entered my dad's car and he drove off. We arrived at my school at exactly 8 a.m. The parking lot was filled to the brim with different cars. The hall was filled as students and parents were seated patiently to see which student will go home with the award of the best student. The head teacher made his way to the podium and declared the ceremony open. He appreciated everyone present at the occasion. He said the occasion is to celebrate the student that performed better. He said before the announcement, there are other activities like singing, dancing, and debate competition. After 2 hours, all activities ended and it was time to award the best student. The head teacher said he will call 3 students to the podium. He said the 3 students had the best result. He said only of those 3 will go home with the prize. He said the other 2 will be compensated too. The head teacher told the gathering to help him welcome Mason Williams. She was received with huge cheers as she made her way to the podium. Next was Chris Taylor. He was also welcomed with sounding applause. I became scared when the headmaster mentioned 2 names without mentioning my name. I began to wonder if I would be called. I never lost hope because I knew I did well in my exam. After that, The head teacher said, "Permit me to welcome Sophia White to the podium." I stood up with tears on my face. My dad and my mom were smiling at me from where they were sitting. I walked to the podium and joined Chris Taylor and Mason Williams, who were already standing. The head teacher reminded the gathering that every student on the podium did well in the exam. He said it's just unfortunate that it is only one person that can wear the crown. He said everybody is a winner, including those that were not called to the podium. The head teacher announced the third position, which was Mason Williams. She collected her prize and she left the podium. It was time to announce the first position. I was shaking where I was standing. I kept remembering iPhone 12 and a trip to the cinema. The head teacher said the prize for the best student goes to Sophia. I screamed in excitement. My dad and my mom joined me on the podium to receive my prize. The head teacher brought out a new iPhone 12 and presented it to me. As soon as I collected the iPhone 12, I opened the box and started taking pictures with it. Other teachers presented gifts to me. Mr. John gave me a school bag while another teacher gave me an umbrella. I took photos with my mom and dad. I took photos with the head teacher and other teachers. After the photo session, food was served to all the guests. I ate to my satisfaction. After the meal, my dad told me it was time to go home. I went over to my teachers and gave each one of them a hug. I appreciated them for their investment in me. I told them I wouldn't be the best student if they did not take their time to teach me very well in class. I rushed down to where my dad parked his car. When I got there, my dad was getting ready to move. I entered the car and we drove off. While we were driving, my dad kept appreciating me. He said I have made him proud. He said the joy he felt when he was called to join me on the podium cannot be quantified. He said the last time he felt that happy was when my mother gave birth to me. He urged me not to relent in my studies. He urged me to continue making him proud. At exactly 4 p.m., we arrived home. We were all tired, so we all went into our rooms. I was the first person to wake up the next morning. I sat on the couch waiting for my dad to come out of his room. After about an hour, my dad came out of his room. I greeted him and he responded. He told me to join him in the dining so that we can have breakfast. While we were having breakfast, I reminded my dad of his promise. I said I want to go to the cinema as soon as possible. My dad agreed to take me to the cinema the next day. I woke up very early in the morning because I had some laundry to do. I packed my clothes into the bathroom and I washed them. After I finished my laundry, I took my bath. I checked the time and it was 7 a.m. I knew breakfast would be ready, so I went to the kitchen to eat breakfast. While I was eating, my dad came out of his room. He said we will be going to the cinema by 10 a.m. He said the movie we want to watch will be shown by 11 a.m. After I finished eating my breakfast, I went back to my room and picked up my novel. I read my novel until 8:30 a.m. before I slept off. I set my alarm at 9:30 a.m. before I slept. As soon as the alarm rang at 9:30 a.m., I got up from my bed and dressed up. I hurriedly dressed up and I came out to the sitting room. A few minutes later, my dad came out of his room already dressed and we moved to the car. We left the house at 10 a.m. and we arrived at the cinema at 11:30 a.m. When we got to the cinema, we went to get our tickets. While my father was buying the tickets, he saw his old friend. My dad and his friend hugged each other. When we entered the cinema, my dad sat at the front with his friend while I went to the back seat. A few minutes later, a young man in his mid-20s came to where I was sitting and sat close to me. He asked for my name and I told him my name is Sophia. He told me his name is Michael. He asked about my family background, educational background, and many other things. He looked cute, so I was happy to answer his questions. Some hours into the discussion, it became more intimate. He asked me if I have a boyfriend and I told him I do not. He looked amazed when I said so. He said he does not have a girlfriend too. He said he has been looking at me from where he was sitting. He said he was happy that I did not sit close to my dad because there was no way he would have approached me. He ended his conversation by saying he loves me. He said he wants me to become his girlfriend. I loved him too, but I did not want to say it immediately so that he wouldn't think I am cheap. I gave him my cell phone number. I told him to call me so that we can talk better. After I gave him my phone number, I told him to leave because I noticed that my dad was already looking for me. After the movie, we entered the car and drove off. I couldn't take his thought off me. It was as if I haven't seen a man before. When we got home, I went straight to my room because I was expecting his call. 30 minutes later, Fred called me. We talked about the movies and many other things. He told me he is still waiting for my reply about his proposal. I told him that I needed to ask him a question that I forgot to ask at the cinema. He told me to ask. I asked him about his age. He said he was 26. Fred told me to give him an instant answer to his proposal. I told Fred that I loved him too. He was very happy as I could hear how loud he was screaming on the phone. We talked about many things before I dropped the call. Since I dropped the call, I have been thinking, I love Fred so much, but I am afraid to continue the relationship because of his age. Fred is 10 years older than me. I think the age difference is much. Hey, guys, please let me know if this is right or your thoughts on this.